Hello. So we're back as the mini double game week that was 25 comes to an end as United and Brighton play out the final game. It's 1-0 to United right now. I'm anticipating the Man United clean sheet going anytime in the next 10 minutes. And it's been a pretty poor couple of weeks, to be honest, for me. Um, Unfortunately, as well, last week, apologies for no pod. So I got some sad news, which meant that FPL didn't matter, I'm afraid. Thank you for everybody who sent me kind words, and that was really appreciated for everybody who did reach out. It's very, very kind of you. Anyway, back now to talk about the upcoming double. We are Who Got the Assist? I'm Tom. Find me on Twitter at WGTA_FPL. My co host for two more podcasts, I think it is Anthony at FPL Stag. And we're joined today by El Labrador, the inveterate cartel member, the social media pariah creator. Everyone's best friend. It's London meetup doyen, FPL Nima. Welcome to the pod, sir.
What's up, bro? As we say, West Side is the best. Repping Ali G strong, but thanks for the invite, guys. I'm glad I can catch you as well, Anthony, for your kind of, I guess, pre-final episode. So it's a nice time to come on, and there's a match finishing in 10 minutes, as you say. So let's see our live ranks as the episode goes on.
Yeah, as we were saying before we hit the record, I don't think we want to see those live ranks, to be perfectly honest with you, Nima. But anyway, it's great to have you on. And indeed, yeah, probably the last pod where there's normal service with me on here. So yeah, it's great to have you on. This pod, I know we're usually a very macro strategic pod, but do you know what? The way things are going with FPL, we have double game weeks and indeed blank game weeks coming up. So we've got to be a bit more tactical from an FPL perspective now. So we're going to be discussing how best to tackle the upcoming double in 26, and we'll also have a good meaty correspondence section, listener questions, and we'll have the usual updates too. The first of which will be the game week reviews.
Cool. All right. Well, the game week is still ongoing. So for those watching, I haven't got the updated things right now. But Nima, can you talk us through what you did, how it's gone for you, and I guess in terms of the season, I know you were flying at the start. Have you sustained that?
Sadly not. So I think one thing I did use today to reassess where I'm at was that I've been very bitter for a few weeks about this kind of up and down. But I realized my worst rank of the season was game week one. So overall, I am actually very happy when I gain that perspective a bit. And this is the best I've ever done in like 9 years at this stage. But you are right. By game week four, I remember I came on the spaces. You were like, wow, we've got you. Let's get some questions. It was like when you have the Midas touch when you're doing well, everyone wants to know what you're doing. And back then I was 1,000 OR 4 weeks in. It's been a long drop since then, but Ronaldo tonight and that clean sheet, if it stays, so famous last words that are going to be captured, I would actually be about 11.5K now. So this would be a big climb back from 33K this week. And it's all dependent on Ronaldo and this double clean sheet, really. But I've gained some perspective, basically. I'm happy. I believe in my top 10K finish, and we'll see how it goes.
I believe in your top 10K finish, that's for sure. However, where I'm concerned is nowhere near the top 10K. So I did wildcard a couple of weeks ago, and it's been really bad. Basically, I managed to drop last week about 50K due to Kane blanking compared to everybody captaining Jota the Slotter. And this double game week again has been pretty poor. I'm about 300K now, and this season pretty much has. I don't know really what it is. I mean, long-term listeners will know that in January I just seem to lose my way a bit. I don't know whether it's just because work's really busy or whether it's just because bad stuff tends to happen to me in January. But the last few weeks have been awful. Like I haven't had a red arrow, I haven't had a green arrow for a while, and a few really brutal 50-50 stuff like Antonio captain over Bowen, not owning Bruno for its explosion. They've all kind of taken it beyond me for the moment. Really, I mean, I suspect I'll wind up at 150K, 100K, something like that. Hopefully, there's 12 game weeks to go, but there's so many points lost that I think it's probably going to be another season in the doldrums. Unfortunately, I don't think it's entirely down to me being a poor manager. I think I have been a bit unlucky sometimes, but nonetheless, the outcome is the outcome. And since my wild card, I've only had 8 returns. 6 of them have come from widely owned players, like Bowen, Trent, Cancelo, and only 2 of them, 2 Robertson clean sheets, have been differentials. So that means I've had 14 blanks since my wild card. I know it's been a pretty poor couple of weeks for many people, but hey, for me in particular, it's not been good. So yeah, 300K at the moment, which is not very good considering at the start of January I was 150. No, I was about 100 and ready to push on. Instead, I've gone in the other direction, which is incredibly annoying. Anthony, how close to me are you now?
I haven't actually got that particular figure ready to go. It's not going to be a huge distance. I'd say it's something akin to 2 dozen points, maybe something like that, which is again still an awful lot less than the 120 something that it was at some point there around the turn of the year. However, the last 2 weeks have also for me been quite poor for similar reasons to you as well, Tom. A captaincy blank in game week 24. I also went with Kane, having taken hits and all sorts of things to get him in. That obviously didn't work out. I did have Jota in my side, but without captaining him, I was punished pretty severely. And indeed, this game week, I moved on Kane and didn't fall into the double game week trap as I saw it by bringing Ronaldo into my side again, having sold him already. I was just trying to chase points in a serious way. But I didn't really think that United would have a good double game week. So having already had Fernandez, who I captained in my side, I decided to go with Wout Weghorst instead up top. 2 points there. That's a big loss versus the old Cristiano thing. I've around 50 points right now. If Bruno was to go and score, I think that would be enough for me to get a green arrow. The safety score for me right now is 55. I'm on 50. So we are kind of in the zone where just one thing going my way might turn the arrow green, but the overall story remains a bit like yourself that I'm very much stuck in the doldrums. And of course, I don't have, like you, I also don't have the wild card to kind of bail myself out of trouble anymore, which means that these upcoming doubles and blanks could be very painful indeed, or they might be, it might mean that I take the zag necessary to actually find some green arrows in the midst of a maelstrom of pain for everyone else.
Yeah, I mean, we'll come on to that in a bit as well. So I think there are a couple of zag opportunities, starting with double game week 26. Oh, Bruno's just missed again. Fantastic. Right, let's move on to the objectives and see how we're going with all of this. Anthony, you've kind of got your head in your hands, but can you rescue your face and tell me a bit about the
Yeah.
about your objectives? How have they been going?
Yeah, they're going badly, Tom. In summary, they're not going well. That's definitely that last 20 seconds was one for the YouTube viewers. I'm not content with hearing Bruno missing again. My objectives, look, we're talking about captaining with the herd or with the algorithms. The herd and the algorithms, they're all wrong. So I'm also being punished with those at the moment. So whilst I am maintaining that particular objective, mostly at least, it's not exactly going well. Transfers, don't be afraid to transfer out elite players if they've dropped off. Yeah, I did that. I've had Ronaldo out, Kane out in the last 2 weeks. I'll sell anyone and they'll probably score. So I'm certainly keeping to that objective, I guess. And then in terms of the other objectives, I was hoping to avoid making transfers late on Fridays and early on Saturdays, depending on when the deadline is. I think I'm largely sticking to that one, but I do feel that this FPL season has had so many late twists and turns that I've ended up having to maybe sit on transfers more than I'd like. And then there was a point where I was hoping to not take any more than 10 hits in total in the season. We've kind of scratched that out, and it's definitely being scratched out. I think I've now hit the 10, and I guarantee you that I will take more hits within the next 3, 4 game weeks and completely break that objective once and for all. So the objectives, as we kind of said a few weeks ago, they were a nice experiment. I liked the idea of them in theory, but in practice they've kind of held me back, and now I'm rebelling against them and probably spiting myself doing so as well.
Yeah, I guess the season does twist and turn a lot, so it's been an interesting thing to look at. I'll probably keep going throughout the year. So my three were captaincy wise, do what Mikel's captain algorithm tells me to do. I've done that last couple of weeks. Captain Kane last week, that was grand, and I captained Bruno this week, which is looking also very grand. So it's not been the best, and I think I'm increasingly thinking back to my prior optimism about it when we first did our kind of half-year review. I mean, Anthony pointed out, actually, hasn't the captaincy just been Captain Salah? And I was a bit kind of like, no, I'm sure it's just the algorithm. It would have stopped me from doing stupid things. But no, I think he's probably right, and I think that maybe it hasn't worked out as well as I'd like it to. Transfers and 50-50 situation take a hit. Well, this week I didn't take a hit. I rolled it, so I just wildcarded, but that sort of thing hasn't worked out too well this year. The key example is Kai Havertz for me, and taking a chance on form, buying in the bandwagon in players. Well, it kind of has happened and kind of hasn't. Like I think I've been co-opting that. objective a lot to just kind of mean what I want it to mean, which is probably a bit of a lesson in making ropey objectives, which are good in a corporate sense. Always make ropey objectives in a corporate sense because you can be flexible and be like, oh, actually, it meant this, didn't mean that. But the reality is that things like, I don't know, betting against teams, so going, I don't know, with a player playing against a certain team to say, oh yeah, but they've got rubbish stats. That's really worked well for me this year. I've numerous examples of just how it seems to have fallen flat on its face to, I don't know, captain the likes of someone like Harry Kane against Southampton, or captaining Dennis. Something just things like that just haven't worked out for me, basically. And I think the idea of form is a very nebulous one. It did mean what I wanted it to mean, but more and more, I just feel like that was a terrible objective to set myself, and it's not really helped me in any way, shape, or form. Hey, form. Anyway, Nima, what are your objectives? Did you have any for this season? Do you have any kind of raison d'etre? Like Matthew Jones style. Make sure you cover off the weakest link, or like Steve was saying last week. Just try to make sure that you're doing this, that, or the other. What do you do?
Yeah, so I think today I found out I'm a very low risk type of FPL player. So I put my team ID into that FPLreview.com, and my risk factor was like almost zero. Like it just doesn't show up on the pie. So I think I don't take as much risk, and I'm very patient. And the thing I told myself I want to do is be a bit more aggressive sometimes. So I hold on to cheap assets for a long time through all their blanks. Like Tony this season is a good example. I held him from game week 1. He dropped all the way in price, a few 0.2 or 0.3 million. I still had him when he'd risen for the double game weeks. I just hold on to players like Antonio. I had him till this week actually, but thankfully I sold him for Ronaldo captain, which so far looks to be turning around my season after like treading water for 10 weeks. But I'd say generally I'm very patient. So I try to not take many hits. I think last season when I checked, I'd taken about minus 48 in hits or so, maybe just below that. So not too crazy. I think that's 12 hits in a year. Like most of them around double game weeks or early on to catch price. What I've also decided is that I'm gonna just one thing I want to change in my game is not always use price as the predictor of points. So many times in double game weeks, I spent more on a player and I always bought the premium option in that team. And every time the cheaper one that would have been better for my team structure beyond the double game week outscores them. And I end up getting like a red arrow. So that just hurts. Like I had Zaha instead of Easy. I had, I think, a Ward instead of Mitchell. It was the Cancelo over Stones in his double. I think there was the Burnley double as well. There was Loughton obviously got the goal after his second shot on target in 9 years. So it really hurts me. And I think I've told myself just stop overspending. Like
No.
reason. But I thought that was just his reaction. But
Yeah, I did. I was the exact same as you, Nima.
Yeah, my internet went. Sorry about
that. Yeah, so we'll see whether I get Ramsey or Coutinho soon, and I think that will show whether I've turned a new leaf. I was saying, Tom, in terms of changing my play style. But I'm very risk averse. I always spend more. I pretty much only captain premiums. That's the main thing I try to do. Like I think we looked at Tom Stevenson. At the time, he was like number 2 or number 1 in the Hall of Fame or Live Hall of Fame, and his prior season when Hibbo and I looked at it together, he'd only had like 10 different captains, and like most of the 38 weeks, it was the same like 2 or 3 premiums. So that also made me realize that, like your Havertz punt, I suppose, and we were there that day together. I don't really do those kind of things. Like, I don't think my heart could take it. Like this week, my template rating is probably the lowest it's been in a few seasons, I would say. And it's at 66% moderately differential. And I think it's just because I don't own Bruno and I captain Ronaldo. I think that's what made me differential, basically. And then I took a hit, Dennis to Morpay, which seems to have paid off. But again, I'm trying to be more aggressive. We'll talk about this later in the show, but Analytics FC have been saying that we'll be surprised by what they do this week. And it sounds like a lot of minus 12 minimums are being floated around. So let's see what's going on there, because I'm now being talked into a bigger hit than I would normally take.
Oh, yeah, no, it's definitely, I think the idea of value being more important than price is definitely something which comes into play as the season progresses. I think that price is only relevant the first kind of 10 game weeks, perhaps. And after that, it stops being a heuristic of how valuable the player is, what a player's worth. I think it's something that I've looked at a lot in the past, and I should probably look at again fairly soon. I think last year I didn't have the time to do the report, but I used to do a very long one alongside Talisman Theory about all of this. Bit of a whoosh moment for most people in the community, but still something which is definitely interesting to look into in terms of how price value, the two things interact, and how value is actually a lot more important. And Analytics FC, you mentioned them earlier, but they're all about value rather than price. Right.
That's really interesting.
Yep. Let's move on to the Min League. We haven't done an update for a while, so I think we probably should do one quickly, Anthony. The code is, well, the code's irrelevant because the Min League's been lots for a while. So we had loads of interlopers making their way into the league, number one. But we've got a new leader, haven't we, this week?
Yeah, to be honest, since we last did an update, I feel like quite a lot of the names have changed
Yeah,
around
we've got
in the
loads of
top
new
10.
leaders.
Yeah, it's like, funnily enough, Tom, yeah, there's been a massive change. So yeah, actually, friend of the pod, James Peralta, is right on the edge of getting into the top 10, having been in there earlier. He's up from 37 to 13th. So a shout out to James, and he's Cy Rutherford, another friend of the pod, is quite close behind him as well. But both of them are outside the top 10.
Oh,
Bottom of the top 10 is, Tom.
I'd say 88 for James Carroll this week. Free hit. Wow, that's ridiculous, isn't it? Really, Sancho or inspired on he got a goal at least on the third one, and things like Mo Pay, and just changing his team up to assault this game week. A bit of a strange pick in some ways, but an 88 pointer is just a huge sort of
an 88
merit.
pointer, and that's with Bruno Fernandes captaincy disappointment as well. And actually, indeed, the Fernandes captaincy disappointment is the norm for the top 10. Just one Sancho and one Ronaldo. The Sancho is actually number 10, up from 18th forever QPR, and that's Pontus Gunlik, who had 77 points. In 9th, up from 12th, is Pedrinko, which is managed by Anas Marti. So 67 points there for Anas. In 8th, up from 13th, is Toko FC by Vil Anonen, and they got 69 points. Joachim Lengrot's Artist Derna is down from 7th, down to 7th from 4th. He got 54 with a -4 as well. Money Maze by Tor Evan Pedersen is down from 3rd to 6th after 51 points. A bit disappointing there, kind of scores a bit like my own for him. Brett Taylor's team, I Love Lamptey, got 62 points this week. He is up to 4th from 6th. And no, he actually didn't own Lamptey, which is a bit of a disaster for him this particular game week anyway. He missed out on a few points there. My internet has just lagged. Okay, here we go. Then up in 4th from 5th is Santiago Munez, the team Santiago Munez, and that's managed by Sam McAfee. He got 56 points. Then in 3rd, up from 8th, is Lucky Prophet. That's Troy Hope's team. He got 78 points, so a bit of a corker for him. And that's the best of the top 3 scores this week. In 2nd, down from our 1st, is the XL11 Hakon Mangernes's team. He got 53 points. And then in 1st, rising to the top, is James S's Larry of Brest. He got 68 points with a -4 this week. Captain Fernandes, but a bit, to be honest, a bit like James Q that we were talking about. He did really go for this double game week. So he has a triplet of United players with Ronaldo, De Gea, and Bruno Fernandes, who indeed he captained, as I said. He has Cucurella and Trossard from Brighton. So one of those working out a lot better than the other. And then it's just a few of the staples, really, of the template. So Trent Alexander-Arnold, Foden, Jota, Bowen, some of them better than others. And because Cancelo didn't play, he is getting a couple of points off the bench as well. So decent game week for him there, and some decent scores all around. They're all flying.
Oh, nice. Well, I suppose we'll come back to that in 2 weeks and see how it goes. And the final thing is the market forces. We'll do it very quickly. I don't think it will change too much off the back of this result, just because of what's going on in terms of double game week. But Salah has been bought back in by almost 400,000 managers and has done, well, quite an impressive rise. He's risen 0.3 in the space of 2 weeks. An interesting rise and fall there, I think, with Salah. But I think it's just one of those where I think his price being at a certain level is probably something that benefits the game. So it makes sense that he's risen very easily. It does kind of call into question. There's been lots of kind of discussions about this in the community about, why he's risen so quickly compared to other players who haven't quite done the same, or why, how it all sort of works. Fundamentally, it's just a bit of a black box. I don't mean as in And Mark's thing, I mean, that I think it benefits them that it's an opaque system that we just talk about it because it creates engagement. I don't really know whether there's an algorithm or not, or whether it's just something that they just mess around with. We trust them that there's an algorithm. There may be one, there may not be one. We just don't know, and they've never really spoken about it except say, "Here's the price rises, here's the price falls." That's all you get. So yeah, Salah up's 13 million. Behind him, it's Saka at the moment. Bukayo Saka, my boy, 110,000 transfers in for him. In third, it's Jared Bowen. Who the hell doesn't own Jared Bowen at this point? Do you even FPL? 80,000 transfers in for him. He's joined actually on that number, just below Bowen by Armando Broja. He's got also 79,000 transfers in, and Coutinho is in fifth, so 76,000 transfers in. On the other side of it, Salah is being sold. It's being bought by Fernandez sales, 150,000 sales for him. That's probably something that I'd be doing. On the other side of it, too, KDB, another placeholder for Salah. He's been sold off now, 141,000 sales for him. Ronaldo has been sold by 131,000. Again, probably a bit of a placeholder, a piggy bank that's now being smashed to bring the Egyptian king in. Elsewhere, Conor Gallagher, people probably realised, oh, hang on, he can't play Chelsea. So he's been sold by 127,000 managers. And Bernardo Silva, remember him? Remember when he was cool? Yeah, well, after a cacophony of blanks, he's now been sold by 91,000 managers.
Just as he scores a hat-trick in Europe as well.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that kind of will make sense. And people are all tooling up towards double game week, which is what we're going to talk about after this break. Speak in just a second. So we're back, and within that break, I'm a bit disappointed we didn't capture it. Bruno Fernandes scored in the last minute, the 97th minute of the Man United game.
Did.
So it's changed the whole complexion of this podcast, and we're now very happy. Whereas Nima is now drinking very heavily from his wine. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
I'm not very happy about that. It's a green arrow, though. I can't be too upset. I don't want to wish bad game weeks on my fellow Bruno captain of friends, but we are all rivals at the end of the day, and I really wanted those points.
Yeah. No, I'm pretty. I'm a lot happier now than I was 10 minutes ago. But God, ridiculous.
Yeah, in the mini league, the update of which we can just basically tear up. Hakon Mangernes is back on top. He's first again. Screw everything that we said. Things have totally changed. Troy Hope, who was in third the last time I discussed this 10 minutes ago, is now sixth. He's still up from eighth, so fair play to him. And whoever it was, the captain Sancho, that was in the top 10, it was Puntus Gunlick, who was 10th. He's now 18th. So goodbye, Puntus. You are relegated to irrelevance. And James Carroll is even closer after 103 on his free hit. He is absolutely flying it. And I now have a green arrow too. So huge news. Huge.
So do I. Getting a nosebleed at 250k. Right, let's move on to the discussion for this main topic area of the podcast, which is what's the best approach to double game week 26? Timestamp, it's the evening of Tuesday, the 15th of February, just before Mo Salah's injury tomorrow night for you all listening against Inter Milan. What's the best approach to double game week 26? Spoiler, obviously there isn't one. But we're here to discuss a few of the key ideas percolating through the FPL world and look at different kind of issues which have arisen through the double game week being here, the kind of questions people are asking, and I guess speaking around how we're looking at it, because it is hard to kind of give general advice here. I think at the start of the season, up until kind of the teens, you're able to kind of give generic advice, which most people are able to kind of use towards their own teams. But at this point, you've started to kind of have paths diverge so much that we're able to kind of give you some advice. But a lot of the time, you have to kind of look at it through the lens of your own team and try to apply what's relevant. And I guess just enjoy what isn't relevant to you and maybe listen to intel about what your rivals may be doing. Who knows? But anyway, the key thing I think in terms of this game week is chip use. There's all kinds basically on the horizon for people. Triple captain, probably a lot of people looking at Salah and thinking, yeah, that's an easy triple captain. I think you'd be blind to not see that. Bench boost, I think some people are looking at it and thinking, oh, this could be a good time to do it, just because later on in the season there's rotation galore. We don't know what's going on then. Whereas right now we kind of do have an idea of what the team's going to look like. Some people may be even looking at free hit, and some people may even think of doing nothing, but I very much doubt that. So I think a good start point here is a question from the FPL Banger Boys. At FPL_banger. They say they've seen some chat about bench boosting, about using -12s or so being thrown out. Nima, you mentioned that earlier on. People doing that in order to build a viable bench boost for this game week, I'm fairly sure. And the banger guys say it feels like forcing a bench boost when there's a clear triple captain. I saw FPL Harry, who will be on this podcast in 2-3 game weeks time, saying, well, this is a really obvious triple captain, why would you do that? But bangers say, there's an instance in recent memory, maybe game week 19 last season, where taking big hits rewards opportunists. Is this true? So I mean, I think it's definitely an interesting one. There's definitely a bit of a crossroads for quite a few people. I'm a good example of that. So I'm open to the idea of bench boosting. I wildcarded a couple of weeks ago, and I set myself up with a few players who have good fixtures on the game week. They're single game weekers, but there might be enough to bench boost with. So it's probably going to be Foster in goal with a double, Dean Buendia against Watford, and Cancelo against Spurs. And it's super close for me, actually, in terms of what the algorithms predict. So I use two, Mikel, the transfer algorithm, and FPL Review. Both of them basically say that my bench will get equal to what Salah will get if Salah plays both games, of course. And I think the question that most people are looking at, annoyingly, I really hate talking about this because it's pure speculation. But the key question to all of this is, will Salah play both games? What's his X-Mins? I guess it's worth looking into to some extent. So there's a 3-day gap between Inter Milan and Norwich, a 4-day gap between Liverpool, between that and Leeds, and a 4-day gap again between Leeds and Chelsea, between that and Chelsea for the EFL Cup final. I'd look over the last couple of years. And it's worth noting that Salah last year, he did appear 38 times. He was benched on the 19th of April versus Leeds for game week 32, following a congested period, which included the Champions League quarterfinals. Did come on, did do nothing. And in 2019-20, he was benched for a couple of games. Game week 13 versus Palace, game week 15 versus Everton, with a hive of games around those. The question is, I suppose, is now different. There's a school of logic which says, on paper, is there a better week to bench boost than this week? Probably. Is there a better week on paper as triple captain than this week? Probably not. But is it feasible to suggest that with Luis Diaz now involved and Salah having played 3 times 120 minutes at AFCON, could he be given a bit of a rest because Liverpool got that strength and depth and Salah's played a lot of games? And I guess for me, it comes down to how much I believe Salah will be benched for one of the games and how much I believe my bench is going to match Salah's 120 points. Really tricky, isn't it? That's where I am. Chip use, where are you on this, Nima? Are you kind of straight up triple captain Salah, no regrets?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think a bench boost has crossed my mind. I'm not well set up for it. I have 5 double game weekers. I'm looking to take a -4 to get to 7 of them. If I'm feeling a little bit frisky, maybe I'll make it a -8 and have 8 double game weekers. But that doesn't get me anywhere near kind of bench boost territory, I don't think personally. With your team, it's a bit more difficult. I did see it earlier, and I know when we'll show our bus teams later. But at first, I did think it looks good. But because of the single game weekers, it kind of makes me worry because this happened to me last year where I bench boosted 3 Leeds players and they got kind of 2 points each. And it's one of those worries.
Yeah.
Like Newcastle, Everton as well last week. Newcastle win 1-0. Not Everton, sorry, New Villa even. And they just win 1-0. And then it's like you've bench boosted single game weekers with all of them in one egg, all your eggs in one basket. It just worries me too much. If you had 10, 11 double game weekers, I don't know if you do after the Martinelli red, then maybe it'd be more tempting. But with single game weekers, I personally think that like I'd be aiming to get 16 on a bench boost minimum. And I guess it is very team specific to say I have my wild card and I'll probably wild card around 35. So it just feels like it's going to be more feasible for me with my team structure to get more doublers then and bench boost then. But I do not like the bench boost, and it does ruin my team most seasons for very little gain. I rarely get the 16 pointer I need many years in.
Yeah, I think just because I've wildcarded early and I'm aware that most people didn't, and I'm aware most people weren't in this situation, because I did wildcard early, it kind of makes sense to get rid of the bench boost earlier, kind of linking into what you said, just because I can then focus on the 11 throughout the course of the year. But I still come back to that idea. Is there going to be a better bench boost than this? Probably. Is there going to be a better triple captain than this? Probably not. But it is worrying, isn't it, Anthony, with regard to, is Salah going to play the two? How's it all going to look? Where would you stand in all this?
I guess I should preface this with the fact that I have very seldom had any success with the triple captaincy, and I have zagged on it multiple times since the chip was introduced. So take everything I say with a pinch of salt from here on in. I'm quite concerned about Salah's game time for sure. You've laid out the timeline there: 3 and 4 games between, 2 games which are much more important than Norwich and Leeds in the league. The fact that's a fact between the Champions League game with Inter and indeed a cup final as well. So looking at that, I'm actually quite tempted to triple captain Trent Alexander-Arnold instead.
Yes.
Actually, you
So
knew
I
it
think
was
that's the
coming.
question. I think for me, that's the question as well, Anthony. So
Yeah.
I don't think bench boost is where I would go even in Tom's shoes at this stage.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like he'd almost be doing it because he's wedded to the idea he wildcarded, so he should get it out the way. But he could
Mm-hmm.
probably get to a good bench boost team later. I think if you're scared about Salah's minutes, Trent, Robbo, Jota, with their equal warnings respectively, I think Liverpool, those matches on paper, as you say, I don't think we've ever had a team of Liverpool's caliber have 2 fixtures of this level in any
Yes.
double game week. So it's kind of like, I don't know. I feel like I have to go for one of those boys, even if it's not Salah and you do want to zag.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. And I just feel like when fatigue bites a big team, they'll tend to grind out a result. And grinding out results tends to mean attempting to keep clean sheets. And I just feel that gives defenders an advantage with a bit more, with obviously a tight calendar as well. Trent doesn't really have a clear replacement to come onto the right, whereas Robbo has the Shimikas problem on the left, and he's a more than capable player to slot in for honestly any of the games, but especially obviously the Norwich or the Leeds game. And then Jota is Jota. He's obviously had his big days in this season, but he's also disappointed people numerous times, me included. And I'm not sure if I just would have the stomach for triple captaining him of all players.
I think
when
he's
it comes
as much of a risk as well. Sorry, just to say, like as Salah, in my opinion, for minutes. So it's like if you're going to take that risk on minutes, I'd rather go for a disgruntled Salah who got knocked out of a cup final than go for Jota, who could be replaced in that lineup himself, right?
Yeah, but like Salah, who has more air miles than a Brent Goose, is kind of isn't necessarily the most enticing idea either.
I think it's 4 games, by the way, Tom, of 120 minutes, including the final.
Yeah. Okay. I think it was 3 in a row though.
Exactly.
They had one where they won in normal time, right, in the round of 16. Is that right?
I think all of them went to penalties.
They all. Oh, God.
Isn't there some sort of silly statistic like you went to an 8-game tournament and managed to play 9.8 games worth of minutes or something like really you couldn't write it and didn't win.
So it hadn't put me off, I'll be honest. I am on him on my bus team. Obviously, Trent is my vice captain, and I think as we get closer to the weekend and we see the minutes as well, I'm going to make a decision from there. But it does worry me. But I think Trent is a very viable, and they're both equal. It's just how much risk you want. I remember Tom captain Trent, was it end of last season towards the tail end, and I believe it may have been a single game week, but you were so scared nothing was going to happen. They'd lost the clean sheet, and out of nowhere, in the 90th minute, Trent got this goal, and I remember you were ecstatic.
Well. Yeah, I capped him for a goal at some point this season as well. I think I certainly capped him for double figures. There ended up being a more obvious captain that did better than him that week, so it kind of slipped in. Just on the bench boost argument as well, while we're discussing it, I just don't feel like the peripheral figures in your side have the fixtures that you really want to be going for the bench boost. And so I feel like this is it. Like I feel like it is one of those forced moments to bench boost. Like the fact of the matter is that Cancelo or Laporte at home to Tottenham are probably more interesting as defensive options than most of the bench boost options in defense, for example, just to pick 2 random players. And I guess that typifies the issue with the bench boost, that we get very obsessed about looking to the doubles when the fact of the matter is that the premiums return quite nicely most weeks. And so if you have your premiums, well lined up, and then your alternative cast have decent fixtures, going in a single game week, I don't think is a bad idea at all. And I don't see this one being the one to do it.
What
personally.
about hits, guys? Not for a bench boost, but just say like a -8 or -12 to get from 4 or 5 double game weekers to somewhere like 7 or 8. I guess where would you cut it off? Like, because some people may ask you, I have 2 free hits, and we've not mentioned that, Chip, but maybe someone wants to be really maverick and
Mhm.
do a free hit 26, get 11 doublers out potentially to really chase upside and back against the kind of the City boys in defense, as you say, for instance. What do we think about that? Because I've obviously got 5. I want 7 minimum is my thinking. I don't know what that magic number would be for you guys. And it doesn't have to be for a bench boost, just to get like an 11 out. How
I
many
guess
out of 11?
I'll give the annoying first answer and say it depends. I guess if you're taking a bunch of hits to try and make sure you move around money to get Salah into your side, I think that's a very different way of framing the use of hits than it is to bring in a bunch of like Dwight McNeil characters
Tarkovsky
into your
and
side.
Pope and
Yeah, not all -8s or -12s are created equally. And I guess I'd bear that in mind more than anything. I don't think it's a bad idea, to be honest, though. At least now, at least with the Tarkovskis as well of this world, at least you've got the double there to justify. At least you might get 8 points from appearances over the course of the multiple game week. So there's better ways to argue putting together the hits because of the Burnley doubles being the kind of the fodder that you can kind of prop up your defense with and prop up your budget with. But overall, yeah, take the hits as you determine. But at the same time, like you think about the points potential that those hits have, and Dwight McNeil doesn't provide much. Jota or Salah provides quite a huge ceiling.
I guess free hit wise, we've got a question on that later on, so we'll come on to that a little
Okay,
bit more
great.
then. In terms of taking hits themselves, a really annoying name. I hate the use of the word. They chose free hit to be the name of the chip. I feel like that was just really confusing, and that happened just then. It's like habitat and habit hat. But nonetheless, I kind of feel like at this particular moment, it does seem that there's big hits are being promulgated as being a particularly decent idea. And I think the point behind that is that you can buy, for example, if you are free hitting in 27, an Arsenal player this week. And the reason behind doing that is because in 30, our game is going ahead. So I think that you're kind of buying a player to have some sort of downstream impact on your team, and it kind of works. It kind of makes sense to be doing that because you're going to get the long-term value out of taking the hit this week, especially if you're removing a player who you don't really want and you're moving on some deadwoods, and you're kind of thinking, you know what, all right, I've got the immediate gain this week of the double, and Arsenal's double is being fated as being a good one because we've got 2 home fixtures. And then you're able to say, you know what, I'm buying a player for this. I can cover in 27 either via my team or via using a free hit chip. And then in game week 30, I've saved myself transfers as well. So there's huge value in doing it. I think, Nima, you mentioned earlier on about big hits being taken by a lot of people in Analytics FC. Do you think that that's kind of the reasoning for it, that there's a long-term value from bringing in those players? Because Arsenal have got, well, I know 3 of our fixtures are pretty bad, the ones to be rescheduled, which are Spurs, Chelsea, and Liverpool. But the rest of the season is really bloody good. We play no top 6 team from last season throughout the rest of the season, apart from those 3 teams that are going to be rescheduled. So there's going to be double game weeks anyway.
Yeah, so I think that's the thing. So I have 3 Liverpool boys, and I have Saka. So in 27, I'm already going to be down to kind of 10 players, and I really want an Arsenal defender because I think these 2 home games are rife for clean sheets. And I've not had Ramsdale all season. I'm pretty confident as well that he's going to potentially be one of the highest scorers of the double. So I really want him. But doing something like De Gea to Ramsdale when De Gea has Leeds next week and I only have 1 free hit, and I'm not going to free hit, is painful. So then the question sort of comes in like, well, what about Pope, as you said? Because is he worth a hit? Because rather than De Gea's 2 games, I could get 4 games from Pope. Now, the painful thing is we don't know if Pope will play in game week 30, and we won't know that till after the game week 27 deadline when the cup games happen. So that frustrates me. I've got 1 free hit. I will use it in game week 30, I believe, if no other fixtures get added. But for now, if Burnley Southampton gets added, I can get to Broha in maybe 27 or a bit later. I can get double Burnley now. So something like a Pope, a Weghorst if he was fit, Tarkovsky. I would go all in on those hits because I would consider them as hits that will pay me off because I can then in 27 sell Jota. I know that's a different debate in itself, but I could then sell him and then I'd only have 3 players from the Arsenal side that I would be benching and Liverpool side again. So what do you think of that then? Do you believe that, like, if you were in my shoes, would you get a Pope with 4 fixtures and just replace De Gea outright? Or would you keep De Gea for your bench for 27 and actually just get Ramsdale as a second goalkeeper? And that worries me, 10.5 million on 2 goalkeepers on a hit. Like, so that's why I'm like, do I go balls deep with Pope? Because De Gea to Pope, 4 fixtures, and then I'm not wasting money on a second goalkeeper either.
Why have David De Gea for Watford when you can have Foster for Man United?
The Backman threat worries me more than the Dean Henderson threat. But that iffy rotation where we were all hoping Foster wouldn't come back for the second game of the double, and he did, and he kept a clean sheet. I thought he was blocking Ramsdale and De Gea clean sheets, but sadly not.
Yeah, I mean, let's hold that thought because we've got questions on goalkeepers later on as well.
Yeah,
hey,
we'll go back to
we're
goalkeeping.
anticipating them all. I think there's one thing to cover off here, which is if you are bench boosting, is there going to be a better triple captain for you? To Ben Crellin's spreadsheet. No, not really.
No.
Oh, really?
I mean, you're really looking at a few things, aren't you? I'm sure Anthony will give me more detail in a minute, but Leicester have got Norwich home left. Are you going to be triple captain James Maddison? Wolves have got a Watford home. I'm going to be triple captaining Jimenez. Kane or Son, maybe. They've got Brighton or Arsenal fixtures reschedule. Game week 36, if you're going to triple captain in that. Spurs are away at Anfield. Oh, it's not very good, is it, Anthony? That's for sure. It doesn't look like there's one that's on the horizon.
No, and to be honest, like there's no point really digging into any further detail than that. It'd just be a waste of oxygen. Like there really aren't. There doesn't look to be a clear, better double game week that you could identify. Sure, you can identify imbalanced fixtures at this distance in single game weeks, but who's to know where things will be by the time a lot of those imbalanced fixtures come along. And so with that in mind, I'm looking at just like a few Chelsea games towards the end of the season, for example. Good, but not so great. A few Tottenham games, but like, would you trust Tottenham with anything? A few Man City games, indeed, even as well. And there's just no argument, really. I don't think. It just feels for me that use the triple captain now if you can, and you've got that quote unquote problem solved, and you've kind of taken the diligent choice. I think.
Yeah, I think it's one of those, isn't it? As I said earlier on, I think this is probably the best triple captain on paper, and there's definitely an argument that you're overthinking it, but it depends hugely on what your team looks like.
What do you think about this, by the way? So I agree with both of what you've said, but someone said to me, I was listening to questions for a pod, and they were like, please tell me why I should like triple captain Salah, apart from that it's Salah. Like, give me hard-earned, detailed stats. So I hope that, like surely you don't need deep detailed stats to like know why to captain a Liverpool asset. Maybe you don't want to captain Salah, so maybe they were skeptical and that's why they wanted stats. Well, if they're going to go by the X-mins, maybe I recommend them to look at Trent. But I think either way, like I don't see why you would look for a single game week triple captain when you got this luxury in front of you.
Liverpool in XG terms, the best attack most of the time. Norwich, one of the worst defenses. Leeds, one of the worst defenses. Salah, one of the best attackers in the world, and indeed in the Premier League over the last like 4 or 5 seasons. There you go. There's your answer.
I'm gonna timestamp that moment and send it to everyone who asks, because I don't think it's even a question, as you say. There won't be a better week in my opinion.
Well, there is a question about whether Salah is the one to go for because of the X-Mins, but there isn't a question of why Salah full stop. There isn't this isn't a here's the reason why you should triple captain Lacazette. That's not what this is.
We'll come to Lacazette later, I'm sure. I have some questions about Lacazette for the pair of you.
Okay. Well, let's roll it.
Well, this nicely brings us on to essentials for this week, because obviously there are loads of players who are being looked at as being part of the essential set in double game week, any blank game week. There are players you need to quote unquote cover, and I think there'll be a few here. Salah, of course, being one of the key ones. Good question. FPL Fledgling, one of the meme goats on Twitter, asks me, hey Tom, which players should I target bring into my team for double game week 26? And Salah is the biggie, isn't he? And I think it's probably worth mentioning the question, who would you sacrifice if you're a non-owner? I think that most people have got triple Liverpool at the moment. I suspect most people have got maybe Jota, Trent, and probably Robertson maybe, or like another one. If you ask, would you ever look at perhaps selling Jota, Nima to accommodate Salah, or would you be kind of looking at selling Robertson if you were like, who would you have?
It's a difficult choice, yeah, because for me in a double game week, I wouldn't be looking to take a hit or like to move money from defense to attack, even if it was like Robertson to Salah. So I think in that scenario, if I already had the double defense, I'd basically back my decision and say, well, I made this choice weeks ago that Jota would eventually become Salah. So I'm not now going to use 2 more transfers because you've already used 2 to potentially get out of Salah, get into Robin, and use another 2 to go back to him. That's 4 transfers to get Salah in and out, and he was only gone for 2 weeks. So for me, that's a bit extreme. I would just go Jota straight to Salah and keep your double defense. There is the question of, do you want to dodge Salah altogether? Like there's a few managers who want to be Maverick like that, and they want to dodge him and just have the double fullbacks and Jota. Fair play to them. I don't take risks like that. I don't live life on the edge like that. So not for me. I'd pass. And in terms of other assets, I do worry about Robertson because there is that question of X-Mins about Salah. I think it would be unfair to not assume the same of Robertson. I think Tsimikas was very good cover earlier on in the season. I'd argue maybe he was actually performing better than Robertson until Robertson came into form more recently. So I'd worry about him equally missing the game before the final and being rested. So really, that does just leave Trent and Salah for me. And Jota's not a consideration, which is why I would, in this scenario, sell him for Salah.
Okay. Well, I mean, Jota's been sold. I think he's 7th or 8th in the transfers out at the moment. I think he's got about 60,000 sales, something like that. And Jota selling him is a bit of a huge bet against Template at the moment. He's 40% owned overall. And he's doing okay in the data over the last 6. Fun fact, Fabinho actually has a higher expected goal involvement over the last 6 games than Jota does, whereas Robbo is not looking very good in the expected data. 0.7 XGI, 3 goal involvements, a big overperformance. And over the course of the season, according to StatsBomb, Jota's a close second behind Salah in terms of the season XGI. I suspect the majority of people listening have this a very large investment in Jota. I bought him at 7.5. He's now 8.5. Getting rid of him is basically saying goodbye to him for the whole season. And I think that perhaps maybe pushing me towards thinking about selling, for me, Robertson instead. And if I had Jota and I had only one sort of our Liverpool player, I might be looking at not selling Jota as being my route to doing something else. I'd be looking at just selling Bruno, which a lot of people are doing. But I think it's a very difficult sell to sell Jota. It really is. And
I would want him this week. That's the difficulty. But I guess you're right. Some people will have double Liverpool, right? So even though they sold Salah, they never then went and put that money back into Robbo. So in that scenario, it's very easy. I think you see it in the market forces, as you said. I think anyone who owns kind of De Bruyne, Bruno, now is the time to move back to Salah with them. I think it's an easy sell. In the Robertson sale, who are you looking at, I guess? Because we're talking about essential picks for this double game week. And for me, I feel like Wolves, the fact that they play in game week 30, that they don't blank in 27, like that's an option. You got the double. Do that. So can you cover that? So I guess that's the question. Like, which of those 3 defenses are you looking at? Is there any other defense beyond those 3 for an essential pick?
I think I mean I got Kilman in on my wild card, so he's already there. I don't have an Arsenal defensive asset at the moment. I think it's quite interesting to look at Arsenal because they've got the best double on paper after Liverpool, courtesy of those 2 home games. And I think season-wide, we've been in the middle of the pack in terms of defensive data, an important win, ground up versus Wolves. But over the last 6 games, importantly, we're second bottom for SGC. Only minuscule amount difference between us and Man City. Ramsdale actually looks like the obvious pickup. So I might be looking at another goalkeeper transfer. We should speak about that later on. Whoops. But Tierney, I think, is one that's got a lot of interest. I can see why, because you've got that kind of any given game week sort of thing going on. But I listened to his data all season long, and it's not that great. His XGI per 90 is 0.12, which is not that great. And over the last 6 matches, not 6 game weeks, but last 6 matches, Gabriel actually has the best XGI amongst defenders, 2.69, which is pretty good. Lots of headed attempts. But I kind of feel like it's just worth, perhaps, if you're looking at buying someone for the long term, just buying White or buying Tomiyasu or something like that and pocketing the difference.
Bit cheaper, yeah. I think I did look at White as an alternative to Tierney. I feel like Ramsdale's the one you really want. And if you've got your goalkeeper covered or you already have him, you could even get a double Arsenal defense. Obviously, again, if you're free hitting in 27, that's a lot easier. I think if I was free hitting 27, I would not be going into this game week without 3 Arsenal assets on top of the 3 Liverpool assets. That's a certainty for me.
Yeah,
That 27 is definitely dominating my thoughts, and I know we're kind of skipping a bit ahead here, but dominating my thoughts when it comes to transfers, because yeah, I could find myself in a very sticky situation very quickly, being tripled up on Liverpool already, for that particular double game week, and this is the reason why I think it's a Wolves defender as someone who's used my wild card and as a non-free hitter in the coming weeks. That's why it's Wolves defenders are kind of winning out in my kind of primary thoughts, I guess, for this double game week ahead of the Arsenal ones, even if their fixtures are kind of dirt in some ways. Leicester have been dodged a bit, so it's not impossible for Wolves to grab a clean sheet out of that one. And Arsenal, whilst obviously improved and things, haven't been a cert to get goals against anyone. So with that in mind, I'm not too scared of having that Wolves defender. And
Which one would you go for? Obviously, Tom's got Kilman already, and people talk about Cody as well as like one of the centre backs. But does Ait Nouri tempt either of you? Would he be someone you'd get over a more nailed starter?
He didn't start this week, did he? And Johnny's now back from injury, so I think that ship has sailed. Really, I think that Kilman did rise the other day, but he's played every minute of the season. Even Cody's been substituted, and Kilman's been left on the pitch. That's probably telling about who he is.
Yeah, Kilman's in my Sky overhaul team. Actually, you make a good point. Where it comes to certain formats, I play much more safely, but Ait Nouri really tempts me because I had heard that there is talk of Johnny potentially actually playing on the other wing back position, and that
Semedo replacing Semedo.
Essentially, yeah, because Semedo doesn't have ample cover, so there was that comment there. But I don't know. Like, obviously, it's Ait Nouri's position that was originally, Johnny's, so it is a bit of a worry. You're right.
Yeah, one thing I would mention is that Wolves have got the 7th best defense season long, according to StatsBomb, but they're pretty middle of the pack over the last 6 weeks. And really tellingly, they've got the 2nd most lucky defense in terms of expected goal concession. So they've conceded much less goals than their expected data would have suggested. So maybe it'll be a bit of a flash in the pan. We'll see what happens with our game. I think that game for me did scream out as a 0-0. But nonetheless, it could be worth just having one. And plus, they play in game week 30. So again, linking into the idea of a long-term pick, if you do buy a Wolves defender, they're going to do you decently over the course of the next little while. And plus, they've got a nice double with Watford at home to come, and Watford can't score for anything, can they? Anthony, what do you think about all this?
Actually, just interesting enough on the Wolves defenders, it's Saiss actually that stands out to me as the one that I pick up. I know he's that little bit more expensive, but we've heard plenty of discussions about how Leicester can't defend off corners. Saiss is the one that you tend to see posing the biggest threat of the Wolves defenders at corners, and that alone, to be honest, is enough for me to merit bringing him in and paying that little bit more. There isn't a huge difference between the 0.3 and 0.4 in the difference between him and Cody and Kilman, and so I think that means that he has, it's worth extra amount with a little bit of a gamble that kind of comes with size, specifically against Leicester, and then generally as well, he does provide a far greater attacking threat than either Kilman
for
or Cody.
Sure. I think Cody, like Mariner used to make the joke on our show that he was like Cody gets a nosebleed every time he goes past the halfway line.
He did. Yeah, he didn't take a shot for years, did he?
For years, he didn't take a shot. Like, if to be honest, it would have been one of these things where if you'd said to us at the start of the season that what's more likely, Salah to score 40 times or Cody to score twice, I'd have said Salah to score 40.
Is Cody a fellow countryman?
No,
he's English.
Sure, but just before you move on from all this, I have a question because Jimenez is someone I'm looking at. I wasn't before. I was going to get Weghorst for double, and I hope he didn't blank in 30 potentially. But Jimenez doesn't blank in 30, and I don't know if I can bring myself to Lacazette either with the blank in 27. So it's kind of like Jimenez instead of a Wolves defender is what I'm kind of maybe pondering on, and then I would get an Arsenal defender or a Burnley defender in that other slot. So although Wolves is great, I think just from my structure, Jimenez actually appeals to me more from Wolves for those same reasons of obviously not blanking. What do you guys think about Jimenez? Has he returned to the same confidence as before his head injury? Because obviously he got a goal this week and that's what people remember. So I'm sure the masses will buy him. But do we actually think that like Jimenez is going to be able to suddenly turn it around and will Wolves score more than like 1 goal a game? Because I think about 3 weeks ago I checked their data, Tom, and they scored like 16 or 17 goals. I think it was,
Yeah,
maybe it
it's
was
rubbish.
14 goals. Yeah, and every team like 10 above them and 10 below them had like double or triple the goals. And I was thinking, how are
10
they
above and
seventh?
10 above and 10 below. Wow.
Yeah, like everyone on the table. Yeah, everyone on the table had insane numbers. It was like 30 goals, 40 goals. Like even the teams that were like, 14th or 15th had double the goals Wolves did up in 7th or 8th. And
Yeah, I've just, for example, I've shots in the box from game week 16 to now up, and I know now different teams play a different amount of games and this sort of thing. But only Burnley, who obviously played the least games of all, have less shots in the box than
oh
Wolves did
god.
in that
Oh,
period. And to be honest, I think that kind of answers the question for me. It's just like whilst it's great to see Jimenez doing well, and whilst he has shown signs that he could be good, he kind of falls into the greater problem that is forwards, and paying 7.4 for him when you can get, cheaper, similar scoring alternatives, I think
so
I'm
what do you
not
think
tempted.
of Broha then? Because that was the alternative. He doesn't have a double game week, and is it ludicrous to take a hit for something like, say, Ronaldo to Broha? Obviously, he faces Norwich, I believe, in game week 27, and maybe he'll face Burnley if that doesn't blank in 30. That seems
Mhm.
like a nice way to free up funds for people who are looking and don't want Weghorst. And obviously, even if he was fit, you just said how poorly Burnley are doing when you
Ah,
describe
well,
Wolves' numbers.
Burnley, you know what you're buying into, and in
Yeah,
that particular statistic that I'm pulling out, Burnley are affected by having played less games.
that's
But
true.
but at the same time, you know what you're getting into with Burnley and with Weghorst. Whereas, yeah, it's a very different proposition when you're looking at someone like Broca. Personally, just given how poorly all the rest of the forwards are doing, I wouldn't have any problem with him. To be honest, he'd be better than, like, I have both João Pedro and Dennis in my team still as a result of the previous double game week. Honestly, I'd rather have
But you wouldn't sell them for a hit
Roca.
this week, right? You'd keep them for their Watford double game week,
Oh,
or
so
I don't know. Would I like? We're getting very in the weeds on my
yeah,
particular team, but
yeah.
I'd be bloody tempted to Nima. I'd be bloody
I just
tempted.
feel like by asking you this, there must be so many listeners in each of our respective shoes, and they're almost like hearing like what they want to do with their own team through our voices.
Oh, it's really bad. Like Broha basically has a really good end of the season. It shouldn't be overstated. The only tough games in inverted commas they've got, i.e., games against top 4 teams from last season, are game week 32 against Chelsea and 37 against Liverpool. The rest of the time, their fixtures are very good, and I think that he has solidified his position as being the number one striker for Ralph Hasenhüttl. I think that he, at 5.3, is probably one of the best sort of flexible strikers you can get. So the entire striker slot has been an absolute shit show throughout the course of the season. That's inarguable at this point. But I think at that price, given the value of what he offers, he's probably worth it. The thing is it this week? Is
That's
this
the thing.
week
I could
worth
get him
doing?
next week for King. Yeah, so
Yeah,
I'm thinking just do that next week, maybe for me.
and that we all hate Watford strikers. We've probably all got one. I mean, I've got one. You've got about 5, Anthony, by the sounds of it. And
Yeah,
looking at the data, it's just ridiculous. To King over the last 6 game weeks, 2 XGI. Oh, it's awful. Dennis near a 1 over the last 6. Ouch! It's terrible. And you've got the likes of Edouard out there, I mean, Weghorst, who kind of briefly touched on earlier on, looks like he might be crocked. I mean, it's really slim pickings amongst strikers. So it could be worth just looking at that singular in terms of Mr. Broher and thinking, you know what, sack off this game week. The strikers are all crap. Let me just grab a player who I'm going to have, I can play him, I can bench him happily. I'm fine with it either way. He's got decent fixtures and he's got a double on the horizon. I think it's a home versus Newcastle's the outstanding fixture. He could be well worth it. I think the strikers in general are very, very very much a vexed question. And yeah, don't buy Lacazette, dear me. Just don't do it.
Okay, so I should stay away from Lacazette. I should stay away from Jimenez. Weghorst might be crocked, and I should probably wait for Broho 1 more week. So does that mean I keep Ronaldo versus Leeds? We'll see what happens.
Probably. I mean,
honestly, yes, yeah.
I mean,
yeah, at this rate, it sounds like unless I need the money to upgrade and I already have Salah, it feels like what's the point? What do you think about not City, sorry, Spurs boys? Then just I feel like they're the
yeah.
one last team.
So this is interesting because we've got a question from Owen who asks, "Is it worth worth it to hit out Foden for Son this week. He says that he's not impressed with Foden's returns recently, but he also says that Spurs aren't filling him with confidence either. So there's not much separating Son and the erstwhile hero. I mean, I kept him, Anthony sold him, Harry Kane over the last few weeks, and not much separating them in terms of the stats bomb data as well. Spurs are still second for expected goals from open play over the last 6 game weeks, and Kane over the last 6 game weeks had more shots on target than any outfield player. He's revving those analog stats like he used to, the old school volume striker, and that's also translating into the XGI. He's second for this over the last few game weeks to 4.81, and he's underperforming by 1.81 as well. It's the 5th worst underperformance of any player. And as I noted last week, this is the first season he's ever massively underperformed. Every other season he's massively overperformed. Will it all turn round? Well, as an owner, I'm hoping it will. A 7% goal conversion is absolutely pants. Jeez. But some ways, he's cheaper than Kane. He's more advanced than Kane in terms of the average positioning maps, and he takes less shots, which is good, actually, because a great proportion of them are on target, which means he's favoured by the bonus system. A quick note too, Spurs have the highest XG underperformance over the last 6. 11.91 is their XG versus only 7 scored. So 5 goals are missing over the last few games, which is just crazy. I do think it's going to happen for them eventually. I think Conte did come out and say after the last game that it was one of the best performances he'd seen from his team, didn't he? So I think it's probably all coming together. I'm reminded of when Luis Suarez was hitting the post all the time in the early days under Rodgers, and it eventually did kind of pay dividends. Maybe it's just the case that things are kind of moving in slowly to fit together. But I think to move us on to Spurs and also move us on to the midfielders, which we haven't really spoken about, Nima. Son, where do you stand on him? How would you answer Owen's question? Would you be moving out Foden and bringing Son in for that double?
See, that's the issue. So for me, I have 5 midfielders, and I don't feel like I would sell any of them this game week. So 2 weeks, De Bruyne outscored him, and it was only when De Bruyne got benched last game week where I had some vindication and Foden finally got me 8 points. But so it just feels like I've had him for 3 weeks. I had him earlier in the season, sold him when we found out he wasn't going to play just pre-deadline. So it's like I really rate Foden. I kind of want to hold him. I think City are the best team in the league. I don't want to get blinded by double game week fever, and even though I prefer Son to Kane for that one reason, I would go to Kane, I think. And that is actually something that after today's chat is starting to become more apparent to me. I could just do Ronaldo to Kane instead of to these trash strikers like Jimenez and Weghorst and Laka. And there's a lot of trash out there. And, Broha can come next week for my Watford striker after their double. So Kane is on my radar. He's 2 million more. I know that's not what everyone wants to do, but I also feel like you're right. Kane, he was averaging like 23 goals in the Prem for 7 seasons, the last 7 seasons. This season, he's way off that. So I do genuinely believe that we will start to see the best of Kane again. And with the kind of players that Spurs have at their disposal now, I wouldn't be certain of Son being as nailed for the X minutes as we might think he is. And I think there is no backup to Kane. So Kane is an easy buy for me just on that note.
You see, I look at the Kane question. I think it's hard to buy into him. I feel like the midfield question is kind of the more vexing one from an FPL perspective. Like, okay, you can stick your money wherever you want in the forwards. You'll probably get 2 points from them. You won't get any goals. This is just how it has been. It is foretold. Whereas when you go to the midfielders, there is a more interesting question. I think with Son, I don't necessarily think expected minutes is the biggest thing that would put me off Son. It's kind of Spurs being Spursy more generally is what would lead me to be fearful for Son. And yet at the same time, like, he's not too far off 200 club form so far this season still. He's nearly at 120 points now with about a quarter-ish, but just over a quarter, maybe a third of the season to go. That's, pretty decent going in the overall scheme of things. He's kind of proven himself to be relatively resilient from an FPL points perspective as well during the Conte reign, which is, obviously a very positive thing, in spite of the fact that maybe obviously against Wolves, there was a pretty disappointing game for him and indeed his teammates more generally. So that's why I think, okay, specifically on the midfield question when it comes to Spurs,
I think you're right. It's good that you made that point, actually, just because I looked at it as a straight Foden to Son question. And actually, if you throw that out of the way and just think about the midfield, Son, like, he's easily one of the best midfielders you could own this season.
Even this season, he's managed to do that when everything has been going poorly. You can't say the same for Kane. Then looking kind of across the grid, maybe you talked about the City midfielders there, and they're kind of an interesting one in that obviously they have the single game week, but as you say, Nima, and you were kind of talking about your own issue when it comes to Foden, any of them can bang. And any of them can get double figures at any particular time.
Silva tonight, right? In the Champions
Silva. I think it's a brace. I called it a hat trick earlier. It's a brace. He had his brace there. Obviously, Sterling had his hat trick over the weekend. There was an 18-pointer just there. It could be anyone in the coming game week, and so I can totally see the argument with Foden. We've discussed Foden ad nauseum over the course of this season. The fact of the matter is that when he plays 90 minutes, he nearly always gets an attacking return. There's very few players in the whole Premier League that you can say that about. Maybe looking more broadly at the midfielders, I'm not sure how many of the double game week midfielders would be that interesting. Okay, do you really want any of the Birdley ones? No, I don't want McNeil. That's basically what that question is. Wolves,
there's Cornet.
Yeah, there's that question.
Just in case he's like, let's say, out of position, if Weghorst is like crocked, like out for a month or something.
There's obviously an implicit interest
but
in
him. But it's still Burnley, though. It's still Burnley.
I personally dumped Rafinha last game week because I was just getting too fed up with what's going on with Leeds. And I kind of missed the Rafinha fluky penalty run, and really there's been no sign of anything kind of coming his way. Otherwise, there's just doesn't have the teammates there performing like he did last year to kind of get the returns that would match his talent. Okay, so we've talked about the Tottenham midfielders, basically Son. I'd be very pro them. Crystal Palace midfielders, Oliza is quite good, obviously. Decent fixtures there. They also kind of fall into the happy category of playing in 27, which is obviously something that the likes of Tom's and I really do need to keep in mind. And the Watford ones that we've been through this.
I think the Arsenal midfield is really where it's at. So I'm quite fortunate in that I've had Saka for a long time. But I have also missed all the points when other players got them. Similar to the City midfield, it rotated a lot with the likes of Smith Rowe and Martinelli and even Odegaard. I do feel for everyone who does have Martinelli. So I guess the first question is like, if you have
Martinelli, just dig into the Arsenal midfield question a little bit more, but both of you maybe. So aside from Martinelli, you've had Saka for a while. So do you think you're obviously going to sit on him because you're not going to move him on? But if you were choosing right now, is Saka the one you'd pick?
Yeah, and I think I said it pre-season. I said it even like when the others were popping, because when I go and watch the games live, and obviously like you can see what's going on off the camera where it's not on the TV view. To me, Saka's clearly the most important player at Arsenal, and tying him down to an extension of his contract is the most vital piece of business we're trying to do this summer. And he was our player of the season last year as a kid. He's still a kid. He's actually 1 year younger than Smith Rowe, but people don't realize that because he started so early playing prominently for us and carrying us, you could say. Obviously, this is where the talisman theory became famous here on who got the assist. And with that in mind, for me, Saka is the guy. Like when the team wants to play or perform, they look to him. If anyone's got a knock, he's never risked. Other players are risked. He's way too important to us in our top 4 challenges. So for me, I would have Saka. But I love the idea of a double Arsenal midfield. If someone can get there this week and they can get that second midfielder, I would get someone with Saka. I think Odegaard, just for the minutes, is the one I would go for over even before kind of the Smith Rowe is gone now. But, he's going to be more nailed, but I wouldn't go to him anyway. Martinelli, Tom, I know you were very close to getting Odegaard over him. At the time, we both said Martinelli is another player we're trying to tie down to a long-term contract. And I believe he's learned to not just run at 100 miles per hour and take the game a bit by the horns and choose when to go at 100 miles per hour, which is getting the best out of Martinelli now. But, Martinelli, Saka, that's the easy double up. I would actually have that for the rest of the season. I think absolutely. Once Martinelli's back, I would own them both. Forget just this double game week and his red card. I think, you will never get assets that price point in a big six club. Like with the fixture run we have, I think double Arsenal mids till the end of the season for me once Martinelli's back from his ban.
Yeah, Saka's head and shoulders above all Arsenal attacking assets season long, although Martinelli's suspension does hurt him a bit, annoyingly, for this double. That was a ludicrous double yellow card, to be honest. You can't appeal yellow cards, annoyingly. And also, Saka's XGI per 90 now is better than Martinelli's 0.45 versus 0.41. Everybody was saying about Martinelli's XGI per 90 being amazing. Well, Saka's actually better than that. Right, the end of this particular section. What's the best approach to double game at 26? It depends. There isn't one. It depends on your team. I think that basically the thing to remember for me is that I've been unlucky in FPL. I've long accepted that. But FPL is always the practice of putting yourself in the position to be lucky. There's lots of nuggets here, depending on what your situation is, that you can apply to where you are, translate into how your team is looking. Nonetheless, I think it'll be an interesting double game week, that's for sure. I think it will be one that definitely a few individuals are going to make the difference. I think we're all looking at Salah to be the man that we do captain or triple captain, depending on how we do it. I think it's going to be very difficult to not captain him. I think that Anthony and I are both looking at triple captaining or captaining Trent and hoping for the best based on the X-Mins. Will we do it? Who knows? Anthony's more likely to do it than I am, let's be fair.
I think I will. I think I will, to be honest.
That's because you're a madman, and I think I may well join you because I may need to. But nonetheless, I think that obviously captaining Salah or captaining a Liverpool player is optimal. But beyond that, it's up to you, and it depends on your team. All right, let's take a break there. Move on to the questions and correspondence, of course, just after this break. All right, we're back and it's time to go into the correspondence and questions. Before we do that, it's worth mentioning a couple of meetups which are going on in the near future. So sadly, I can no longer make the 18th of February meetup in Bristol. That is in the King Street Brewhouse, but do let me know if you are interested in going along to that. I'm going to try to make my way to Bristol in March or maybe April, but likely March to do something or other again then. But the King Street Brewhouse, from about kind of midday onwards, the guys have got a room in that pub. I think it's the tank room for the whole day. I think it's about 30 people going, so that should be really, really good. Yeah, 18th of February in Bristol. If you're interested, let me know on Twitter, and I will pop you into the group. And then subsequent meetups, you'll be part of that if you're in the West Country. And FPL Nima does run his own meetup group in London, the doyen of FPL meetups. There's another one going on this Saturday, the 18th of February. And tell us about it, Nima.
Yeah, so as you will know, the first one was just 5 friends. We watched our beloved Arsenal get slapped up 5-0 against Man City with dread. That was a great midday kickoff. And since then, this is going to be the 6th one now. We've been meeting up every month in London. And I don't know, it's kind of really blown up out of proportion, if I'm honest. And it's not what I expected, but it's the best part of the FPL community. And it's just like friends getting together, watching the matches. Like it's kind of like 8 to 12 hour days, people come and go. And now we've gone from 5 people to, I've actually had to get the bigger room this time, Tom. So it's the upstairs I've had to private hire. So it's getting bigger each time. Last time we got exclusive downstairs lounge, this time upstairs with a projector. So it's been great fun. Lots of FPL kind of, I guess, fellow addicts are coming, all the way from content creators down to people who don't even have Twitter accounts, and many casuals alike. So everyone is welcome. It's great fun. And we hope to make it a bigger thing. And obviously, Tom, you're one of the founding members in that first 5. So it's crazy. Here you are shouting out a Bristol West Country meetup, a London meetup, both on the same day. In a year's time, there'll be a meetup in every city. FPL's taking over.
On the island of Ireland, as Steve was mentioning too. I'm sure there'll be one.
It'll happen. We swear.
We saw Australia as well, right? They did one. So it's starting. It's kicking off all over the world.
I've managed to be at FPL meetups in New York and also in London, and they've been brilliant. Really, really brilliant. Never managed to get to one in Ireland, though, kind of ridiculously. But they are really, really good, and I'd really advise anyone to go to those if they could. And Nima, fair play to you for organising them as consistently as you are. It's great to have a fulcrum in things, and it's really important because you do need someone to really drive it on. So fair play to you.
No, I hope you can come along one day, or maybe I'll come to Ireland and you'll go to your first Irish meetup at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. You make me get to one in Ireland. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't fly anymore for environmental reasons, but I think one of the reasons I would fly is to come to Ireland to go to one.
There's a boat. There's a perfectly reasonable option
Oh,
for
it's
Ireland.
just such a long drive. Do I
I'll
want to go
drive
out
you,
there
Tom.
and
So
do
that's the
that?
other
Yeah,
thing.
all right,
I guess
all
the
right.
good news is before you go on to the final meetup, shout out, because I'm offering a drive to 4 lucky listeners from London to Birmingham for that too. But apart from that road trip that I'm offering, that I just decided while drinking wine live on air, and the thing about the meetups I want to say is everyone's kind of been giving their feedback, and I think what's been really a breath of fresh air for me is that they're really loving it, and some people are saying it's like the best night out they've had in years, and like regular people are coming back, and others are hearing about it. And the videos you saw last time, and for anyone who's not seen it, the Dennis red card reaction, and the King captain has went crazy. We had FPL Harry, who'll be here in a couple of weeks, and he looked distraught, like his life was over. So that raked up like 200k views on Twitter. I was shocked. And the normal comment, I found it on Reddit after as well. They were like, "This is the biggest bunch of virgins I've ever seen." So that's the best advert I can give you. If you want to come and play FPL with fellow virgin FPL managers, come and meet us. I wonder if Tom will edit this bit out, but
No, I won't. If you want to meet up with loads of bearded men and women, actually, not bearded
there's
women.
a few women. Yeah, see,
They're not
community
bearded.
together.
They're not bearded. They're not dwarfs. They're normal people. Unfortunately, obviously, the demographic does shift towards men of a certain age, but nonetheless, it's very good. And as Nima kind of referenced, it's just really good because at the end of the day, when you get to kind of your late 20s, early 30s, it's harder and harder to get out there, meet new people, make new friends. And I think we've definitely found that we've made new friends, haven't we, Nima, from so many different people that have been on these events.
We never have met them as well, right? So
exactly,
it's crazy, yeah.
And I would completely, a bit of people kind of say, what, I'm a bit concerned because I'm going on my own. Just do it, because at the end of the day, you get there. FPL is a great equalizer because everyone's into it. After a while, everyone gets their phone out and looking at our teams, and we're talking about those sorts of things. And it doesn't, for me, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm a content creator or whatever. But at the end of the day, I'm just a person who really likes FPL, and everyone else is. And that's just such a good way of doing it. And after a while, FPL becomes like a bridge to talking about everything else that goes on in real life. Final thing to mention is Benny Blanco at Benny Blanco at Benny_Blanco40 is running a North versus South charity football match in aid of Street Child United, Saturday 28th of March 2022 in Birmingham. And if you want to go along to that, you can find all the information you want to know about that at GW39 North versus South, all one word, .co.uk. And Benny can be found at Benny_Blanco40. He and FPL chief at FPL Hints are running that, and I think that again will be a very good event. I sadly can't make that one either.
That's just in May, by the way, Tom. I think you said March accidentally.
Oh, sorry. So 28th, Saturday, 28th of May, 2022.
After game week 38 ends, and we know our ranks, and I hear it's going to be live streamed for those who can't make it. Hopefully, maybe I'll try and live stream it. Otherwise, on Instagram, I'll plug my Insta later for that if anyone wants to watch and they don't stream it. But get your bets on. I'm taking bookies odds. Team South is the favourites. I met one of them today, as you saw. Bumped into Andy Martin, just out of nowhere in Bournemouth. So it is nice to see fellow FPL managers. I think that's what I would just parting for on all these meetup section is. I never thought FPL would be the thing that would like get me to meet so many new friends in my life. And I think as an adult, it's more difficult to make new friends in that sense. Obviously, you're busy working, you have your family life, and this common passion we have, this obsession with the game through the highs and lows. It really makes you feel like you can go to any city now in the world and just find FPL managers who love the game. And we're all just like, that's why I said addicts earlier. Like there is beautifully no divide between like kind of any content creator or FPL player in these meetups. And I think the fact that they're getting so much bigger and more popular, including a charity football match, it just shows that there's a lot of bigger things to come in the FPL community in the years ahead.
If you're dumb enough to think that you're different being a content creator, you need to go and get your head screwed on. Anyway, let's move on to the rest of this podcast, starting with the correspondence. Anthony, take it away for the penultimate time.
You nearly do a big build up. No, yes, indeed, it is the correspondence section, the section where you guys can get your long form thoughts, addendums, questions, poetry, songs, or whatever else it might be into whogottheassist@gmail.com or whatever other means you have of reaching myself and Tom, or indeed later soon to be Harry as well. This correspondence has come in, and it's another old one. This has been a bit of an issue lately where we just didn't get around to them. I know, I know, I know. I'm so sorry. And this was James C. So thank you very much, James C, for emailing whogottheassist@gmail.com. And he sent us a rather long email, which was really well put together and things, talking about his, you know, the amount of hits that he'd taken so far in the season, and the sorts of questions that he asked himself and the things he had to consider when it came to his FOMO with bandwagons and focusing on team value and all the rest of it. But the crux of his question, in truth, was, is there a formula that can be derived to give an empirically based rank for certain player positions? I.e., I'm going to rephrase that to, is there certain stats that you think are more important or which can be amalgamated together to form the ultimate method of figuring out your transfers and figuring out which players provide you with the most value in FPL? So, lads, on that particular question, thank you, James, for emailing in. What do you think?
I mean, there's loads of ways to look at and assess data, and great arguments have raged for a long time about the best way of comprehending a player's worth, value, whatever, using it. But fundamentally, as I always say, stats are part of and not the full picture. I think anybody in that analytics FC or however they're aligned, or it's the grass FC sort of stuff, where they're people, for people who aren't on Twitter, that's the people who say, the eye test is king, versus the analytics crowd who say, it's all about the data, it's all about the spreadsheets and everything like that. I think if you look at the data set's always there for everybody. There's loads of things like researcher bias, and confirmation bias that will find the way to make the data work to suit your argument. What's really useful is that the eye test is a really important way to weigh that data. So to say, what, okay, the data says this, but I've watched a few games and I know that even though this player's data is very good, the reality is that they're not a very good player. And as Nima said earlier on as well, looking at players in real life is very important. So looking at a character like Josh King, for example, is very important here. So he's very well regarded by a lot of the algorithms out there. You need to probably factor in, though, that he's probably not the best finisher in the world. An absurdam example of that is that if I was playing for Man City, me, I would probably be played in by Kevin De Bruyne a lot in the 6-yard box. I wouldn't be able to finish because I'm a terrible footballer, but my X data would show that I'm brilliant. I'm great at getting into spots if I was goal hanging, but I'm not a good footballer. Josh King is a much better footballer than I am, but Watford don't have a KDB. And Josh King's data is still probably better than his actual finishing is, which is not very good. Finishing skill in particular is a live area of discussion in the analytics world because it doesn't quite equate to what the expected goals are. You can get in great positions, but if you're not able to finish the chances, you aren't going to be eliciting the outcomes that we expect to make you look into a good player. And it does mean that after a while, you look at the data and you kind of have to layer in this notion of, is that player actually any good? That's where the eye test, that's where the data, both of them come together, and you need to be able to weigh that data against the eye test. TLDR from me for James's question is basically twofold. One, defensive data. If you're looking at a goalkeeper, you're looking at a cheap centre back, I'll look at team data. So centre backs who are 4.5, the sort of players who are going to come on every now and again and do a job for you. Team data, team XGC, that's what's really important. Some centre backs as well, it's worth looking at, stuff like bonus generation, and maybe XG, so headers from corners and things like that. But it's mostly about team XGC data. Are they able to give you a clean sheet? What is their kind of overall chance of getting you that clean sheet to get you that 6 points? I think that's probably going to be the ceiling. For goalkeepers, you also need to throw in XG, expected goals prevented, and also save. So are they going to be able to give you, even if they don't concede, even if they do concede, sorry, are they going to be able to give you some saves to give you extra points on top of what they do? Attacking wise, there's one king stat. That is non-pen XG plus A on FBref StatsBomb. That's the king stat because it basically just says how likely are they going to be involved in a goal for their team. And I think that's really important. XGI, I guess, is another way of looking at it. XGI from open play, if you're looking at it on Scout or also on Hub. But I think those two are the key for me. I don't really kind of see any other stat being worth it. People do look at kind of things like, oh, touches in the box, oh, shots on target, etc., etc. If only there is a way of bringing this all together, what there is, and it's expected data. That's all it is. It's a way of basically bringing all of it together, making it into a collage, making it into a combination of data points and summarizing them in one data point, which is basically non-pen XG plus A. Nima,
I
agree,
like
disagree?
that. Yeah, no, I like that. Just because for me, I think I definitely agree on the non-penalty XG side of it, but then I will look at certain players like Josh King and get sucked in when I see that their stats are good, and on top of it, he suddenly has penalties. So I have been falling into those traps myself. I guess the other thing I would look at is just I know we're talking about stats, you talk about eye tests and then kind of like analytics. And I said this earlier to you. For me, I think we're not playing like a game where we're playing FPL against a PC or a computer. Like we're not actually trying to get the most points that we think we could get in a team. It's like more like poker. It's akin to that. So we're trying to compete with other FPL managers and what they're gonna do. So a lot of people will hate me for this, but like I treat EO as a stat. Like I consider that a stat, and I look at like my price and how much of my budget is spent on certain positions, and do I own a premium in each position that would let me get to any other player if they start doing really well and have value. That stuff weighs a lot to me in my thinking and decision making. So I actually do see EO as like a stat, and I look at the assets I own and I look at their ownership dropping, and then I look at their other underlying stats and the eye test, and I say, do I want to sell them, or can I take advantage of the lower EO? Because while people sell, I think this week he's going to actually do really well. So I'll lose the prices, but I'll wait for the points kind of thing. And that's what I was saying about being patient over the season. Equally, the opposite is true, where if a player's EO gets very high, and maybe I think their numbers are they're overperforming, let's say, and the eye test shows I don't think they're going to carry on. Like maybe the lucky penalties with Rafinha, for instance, that we didn't know he had. Then I'd be like, I will just avoid this asset. I'll wait. Like they'll revert back to the norm. My eye test tells me the data is overperforming. They will revert soon. And I've missed the points I could have gained when their EO was low. So I'll be buying them as a shield to protect my rank. I'm going to attack somewhere else at another emerging asset. So I think that's what FPL has become to me. I really enjoy the market forces you talk about, and like what's the next asset to get on, and have I missed that train or not? Like I think it's all about, do you get onto the asset with 2-3 weeks where they're going to actually gain you rank and points? Because after that, if they're doing it, everyone will own them. And we've seen that this season, right? I think last week, Jota, Bowen, Cancelo, Trent, 4 of my 11, the one I didn't captain, they weren't going to help my rank. They were all over 100% ownership. So again, I do think like for me, that's a major stat. And I know a lot of people wouldn't agree with that. And
No,
they'll say, don't make decisions on EO, but I'm trying to beat other managers, and knowing like where I can gain ground or lose ground. For me, that's how I play poker, and I love poker. So I kind of treat FPL that way, and I add the numbers and eye tests, but I actually look at EO a lot more. And late risers told me like I should go with my gut more and trust my football beliefs. And I said, let's see, because I'm very risk averse, as you saw on my profile.
I think the power of EO is very strong. I think that live FPL has definitely become a real thing amongst managers. That's definitely true. I think that you only need to see when a popular player scores that you can't get on live FPL, and you'll see the Python, too much traffic thing going on. And I think that there's definitely a school of thought that you need to just kind of divorce yourself from what everyone else is doing. And probably the best thing that the worst thing I ever did was learn what everyone else is doing, because at the end of the day, that affects your game. There's no way around looking at that. This game week is a great example where I know that everyone's been captaining Salah. If I was looking outside of that and just kind of looked at my team and thought, you know what? All right, well, I think that Salah is going to be worth owning because he might do something, but I think that Trent's going to play both games and he could well do something as well. But I know now that Salah's going to be owned by loads of people and captained by loads of people. It's a very difficult one. And I think that EO definitely is one that I kind of wish I didn't know about. EO as well is one that can warp decision making an awful lot.
Even if we choose not to use it, right? I think that's the problem. People say they don't use EO for their decisions, but a lot of the time they're just going against EO, and that's still a decision based on EO. So I think you can go in either extreme. You can kind of follow EO and only make EO decisions, or you can try and always do the opposite. And like sometimes it might pay off, sure, but my main thing is that because you're playing other people, the times it doesn't pay off, like that will tank seasons. And I guess that's why someone who's more maverick, they'll have really high ranks, and then maybe they'll also have some really bad ranks. Then you've got the Abduls of the world who they're not human, but
this is what differentiates FPL from actual football, isn't it? It's the gamified edge FPL has got. That, the transfer market, and captaincy. Those are the three things. And captaincy obviously is folded in with EO. But those three things make FPL a bit of a different proposition to just kind of saying, all right, you know, I'm going to be predicting every week what the best 11 is going to be. You got to manage your team. You got to do this. You got to do that.
Like if I was betting against the market, right, and I wanted to bet for money, like I would bet based on what I think is going to happen. But in FPL, I don't necessarily need to bet on what I think is going to be the best thing. Because yeah, you know, maybe I want to captain someone who's 5% EO and I'll get 200% of their points. But if I know that 4 of my players are over 100%, why would I want to only be rooting on 7 of the 11 assets I own? Like that's the other problem. Like I started playing FPL to enjoy it. So I do say that actually eye test does factor in a lot for me. And that's why I liked what you said about boiling it down to 2 or 3 key stats that you religiously will look at, but everything else, like watch the game, see what you think, and try to preempt stuff as well. So because I'd rather watch a game and enjoy it, and I buy assets who I enjoy watching. That was the question about Cody earlier. Was it's kind of like I don't want a player Nori excited me. So there's another problem I have there where that bias comes in. I like to buy players I enjoy watching because I play FPL because I want to enjoy the football more.
Yeah, but contextually, you also know that Nori may not play the minutes he wants to play. And that's X-Mins again.
And that's another stat. So I think X-Mins is a bigger stat this season than I've thought about in prior seasons. If you wanted to just talk about stats, I would put X-Mins as a big stat there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's all one of those things that like it's stats are part of not the full picture. And I think you could do very, very well watching the games and not really paying any attention to anything, just saying that player looks dangerous, I'll bring him in. Next week he does a goal, amazing. And you've also got the likes of Simon March, who came on our pod for behavioural science during the course of summer, who won FPL without really watching any games. It works both ways. It really does. And it really is about variance and how those things impact you.
I think it's your style as well, though. So you've got to tap into what your preferred play style is. And I think if you play the way that you will be kind of in the zone, you could say, that's when you're going to really do well. I think if you go against your style of play, you'll end up actually like making worse and worse mistakes that damage you in the long run.
Well, that's a different question. But anyway,
Yeah.
Anthony, what do you think about all of this? And do you want to bring it to an end too?
I'll bring it to an end because you guys have really kind of discussed every angle on this, I think, possible. James, when he kind of asked this question, was really trying to focus on stats. And I think when he was thinking about it, he was thinking about picking players based on, you know, their actual stats and what they do on the pitch. So, you know, very quickly, you can talk about, you know, all sorts of, you know, what I would call traditional stats, but you know, all of those feed into XG, XA, XES, whatever. And so I think the expected stats are kind of the stats to rule them all, as you kind of started to get at in your particular spiel, Tom. And that is interesting. But then, Nima, as you were saying, EO does, for better or for worse, have a significant impact on decision making in FPL and the extent that you will have success with decisions in FPL. You know, that is what, you know, delineates the risk and reward, not so much the stats that you pick on. You know, the stats that you pick on aren't really all that relevant by comparison to how others do around you. And so it's hard to, you know, discuss this question of which stats are important without thinking about EO and indeed, yeah, of course, expected minutes. But really, EO does have to feed into it, especially when you're looking at, let's say, he was talking about it by position. So for goalkeepers, you know, expected minutes is very important. EO less important. EO hugely important for a midfielder. Even if X-Mins is low, if the EO is high, it doesn't really matter you might need to have that player in just to cover yourself. For example, Foden in a big double game week for Man City, even if there is a risk that he only plays one out of the two games, if he's owned by 160% of managers, you'd be brave to not have him. So it is interesting kind of the way that these things interplay. There is no true answer for your question, James, but it is certainly one that is worth pondering. So thanks so much for emailing into whogottheassist@gmail.com. We will still be taking correspondence even after my departure. So please do email whogottheassist@gmail.com. I'm just browbeating Tom into continuing the segment here. I don't know if that's actually confirmed.
Will we? I think I'm going to give Lucy a chance to think about how she wants to have a section to herself. But we'll have a couple. We've got a couple of correspondence questions left, which we will answer on Anthony's penultimate pod. Right, let's move on to the questions this week. There are only a few of them because obviously we've covered most of them in the main chat. The first one this week is from Tom at FPL Dummy Tom, who asks if a Burnley defender is a good choice to bring in, considering the double-double. This week's fixtures are pretty iffy, but I'd certainly be looking at one for game week 27 with Palace and Leicester. The concession of headed attempts, which you mentioned earlier on, is noteworthy. I haven't looked on FPL Twitter, but I'm sure somebody has done some sort of, post-thread amazing infographic about it somewhere. All season, Leicester have conceded the most headed goal attempts. Palace is somewhere in the middle. One thing I'd note, though, is that Burnley have had the least attempts from corners of any team this season, only 33. And their recent SGI is nothing to write home about. So you're getting these guys in for appearance. Let's be honest. That's the only reason you'd be getting these guys in, because their XGC is nothing to write home about either. Obviously, we've got the kind of residual feeling that Burnley were very, very good defensively of old. It doesn't really seem to be the case at the moment, but Dyche and Burnley are always able to shut things down, play negatively or whatever. Burnley-wise in general, Weghorst, who I know you brought in Anthony, and I know Nima you're looking at. This looks okay, decent enough. Cornet has been shoved out wide to accommodate J-Rod, which hasn't quite worked. I also remember as well, Cornet's 5.9. Obviously, there's loads of double game weeks coming up for him. But remember, he was massively outperforming his XG for a long time. He was basically in the goal of month competition with himself. And his Jelic style golden touch looks to have trailed off a little bit. But at 5.9, you could be interested. I'm not particularly interested. And speaking to the likes of Claret FPL, at the moment, you've got to think it's a case of, lads, it's Burnley. If you can get one in fairly easily, then do it, because you're going to get appearance points. But I think the expectations have to be very, very low beyond that. Anthony, what do you think here?
For me, it's just, I think there's, as you say, it's the initial two fixtures are just quite tough, which means that you might not be that interested in any of the Burnley defenders just on the basis of those. But at the same time, Brighton, not exactly free scoring. Spurs haven't been free scoring, could easily find themselves just in a slugfest with Burnley, especially at Turf Lane and our Turf Moor even, and may not could quite easily come unstuck. So I wouldn't rule them out. And I guess, as we were discussing far earlier in the podcast, we were talking about how you bring in the Burnley players now as part of a grandiose -8. At least you've got the justification of the number of games that they're going to play for your side, and that means that they might not necessarily be a bad transfer if you're just going to be making another defensive transfer to bring one of them in another game week's time anyway. Even if you end up benching them for this double game week that's coming. Of the defenders that are there, Tarkowski is the one who seems to be kind of just getting more of the attempts. As Thomas pointed out, there aren't that many of those attempts. I think that just comes down to just not getting many corners. But of those, it does seem like Tarkowski presents the biggest threat of them. Pope wouldn't necessarily be a bad question or a bad player to bring in. We'll have a question on goalkeepers a little bit further on, maybe, where Pope can be touched upon in more detail. And I just hope that Weghorst is fit, because, to be honest, of all of their attacking options, I know this question was really about the double-double for Burnley defenders, but I think Weghorst looks like a pretty decent kind of option for these 4 games that they have in 2 game weeks. the man's just gonna cause problems, and I feel for Brighton that could be an issue. Certainly with that Spurs defense, that could cause trouble. And then after that, as we say, then we're talking about that Leicester game with Leicester conceding from corners, Leicester conceding headed attempts in general. I feel whatever he is, like 11'10", Wout Weghorst, is the sort of player that I'd like to own in that particular game. So yeah, Burnley, there's definitely an option there. For now, for this game week, really only if you're for defenders. I think if you're doing a big load of transfers, that means that you're going to be taking hits, bringing in defenders anyway. You might as well get them now. Nima, do you have any different thoughts on the Burnley defenders, or?
It's a difficult one for me because I have Dawson, and right now he's playing Newcastle at home, and then he's got Wolves in 27 as well, which I believe is potentially also at home. Now, I know West Ham haven't kept many clean sheets this season, and he got that kind of goal I was hoping he would get against Leicester in the last game. I did think that was a possibility, so I'm very lucky about that one off the bench. But I asked myself, a -4 now to get 4 games from like a Tarkovsky, as you say. Is Tarkovsky going to outscore him in 4 matches? Like, will I look back on this and think to myself, wow, those 2 games for Dawson without the hit, like maybe that was fine. So it's a difficult one for me. It's like I'm selling a player from a team defensively that I don't really want to own. I'm going to sell eventually for maybe like a Wolves defender, let's say, but I'm bringing in a Burnley defender for the sake of these fixtures, and that to me there's not a good enough reason to bring them in. So the other alternative is I could do De Gea to Pope, and that suddenly feels a bit more exciting because it's like I don't want De Gea long term.
And so hold that thought for even 1 second there, because the next question that we have kind of brings us on to the goalkeeper transfers. And it's Sam FPL Pricey was asking specifically about buying Ramsdale or Pope for David De Gea and whether that was a worthwhile move this week, even for a hit. Now, Nima, continue.
So I think I would, like right now, I'm going to get one of the two for the hit no matter what. So I think it's definitely worth it. It's just which one is my issue. It's like your question of which one of the Liverpool players should I captain? For me, I feel like this goalkeeper change from De Gea, it's a must. The problem is I can't do De Gea to Ramsdale because then I won't have a keeper in 27. I'm not going to be able to free hit. So then in that scenario, I'd actually end up with Ramsdale and De Gea. That's like 10 million on goalkeepers. I'm not wildcarding for a long time. It's worth it if I can get like a Weghorst, just going back onto the Burnley thing. So for me, who my Ronaldo replacement is determines the goalkeeper quite a lot. Because if it's Weghorst, I don't know if I want to double up on Weghorst and Pope, for instance. So then I might have enough money as well suddenly from the 6 mil freed up to have Ramsdale and De Gea. Why not? Get Ramsdale for his double, play De Gea in 27, and inshallah Ramsdale has another double in 28.
You got your wild card, haven't you?
And teeing yourself up for a bench boost as well.
Well, I don't know about that because the bench boost is not coming till 36, but and that's the issue. So the kind of De Gea to Ramsdale or De Gea to Pope seems easy enough, and that's one option where I might actually just, and I think we come to this question next as well, but essentially, like I could just have 10 players in 27. Like I don't mind not having a goalkeeper. So if I did do like a De Gea to Ramsdale, I could do like De Gea to Ramsdale, Ronaldo to Kane, only a -4, and just play no goalkeeper next week and just have Ramsdale for the whole season. And I think that's an alternative I'm willing to go for. So just to Pricey's point, mate, take the hit, make it a -4. Either one will do. But look at your 27 and 30 team. I don't know how you're looking there, but I'm not looking great. So I'm definitely doing this move at some point.
Oh, just tell the grandkids that whatever goalkeeper you brought in conceded 4 goals and it's fine. Just of all positions, I think you're probably okay not having a goalkeeper. But to bring us back to Sam's question, yeah, I like it. I mean, I love a goalkeeper transfer. It's probably the most aggressive move you can make in FPL. But Ramsdale in particular is like the one to get. As I mentioned earlier, the fixtures are very good. And it makes me wonder a little bit why I bought the Gea on my wildcard as a default. I was perhaps a bit silly to get FOMO about nice defense, perhaps, because they had the double game week, and it just at the time, i.e., 2 weeks ago, I was looking at thinking, well, there's Burnley away, they'll concede there, they did, and Southampton at home, they probably won't concede there, they did, and the Brighton game. I was thinking of 3 clean sheets, and then you got 1. But nonetheless, I think that Ramsdale is probably worth just getting. He's the obvious pickup. He's the best goalkeeper for XG prevented this season, and you can have him there for the whole season. Most people are going to probably have Foster as been backup goalkeeper at this point, and he can probably kind of come in on the games he's not going to play. It's probably going to be my 6th goalkeeper transfer of the season for those counting. So it's probably going to be one of those where you can look at it. I know, for example, on the other side of it, Fabio Borje Nima got Pope the other week.
I saw that. Yeah, that was an interesting one, and it is one worth thinking about. He's obviously like got the Midas touch, as you say, if that exists. Whatever he touches, he turns to gold, right? He was 700k a few weeks ago, and he's back on for a top 1k finish or something.
Yeah, I think I'm not particularly interested in Burnley, their defence. So earlier on, lads, it's
Yeah,
Burnley.
Ramsdale over Pope, though. Yeah, I agree with you.
But he'd be the one that I'd be interested if I was.
So would you do that in
Burnley.
my situation as like a keep De Gea for 27?
Yeah, you've got your wild card, so you can just do whatever the fuck you want, basically.
So there's no point not riding without a goalkeeper next week in 27 by doing De Gea to Ramsdale. Like, I just get Ramsdale and De Gea basically for now, and then wildcard it out.
Why not? You wildcard it out very soon, don't you? You can wildcard in 31, I suspect. So
maybe, but 35 is the 4. If I don't free hit in 30, then yes, I will wildcard in 31 probably, because that dead end team will not look good with a double Burnley and all kinds of other trash in it.
Who knows? So right, we're going to move. So mentioning free hits, let's move on to free hit usage going forwards. Benny Blanco says, lads, when's the best week to free hit for those with 2 left? Game week 30 is obvious, but could game week change to 27 be the next best with Liverpool and Arsenal assets can be kept? And Adam Pritchard at 35 Who? How many players is the amount that could trigger your decision to free hit? If you have 9 players, 10 players, is that worth using the chip in game week 27? What are you going to do? So, I mean, I think game week 27 is looking pretty good for a free hit, just because I think most of us can be moving out of City. Probably most of us can be moving out United as well. City are away at Everton that week, and Man United are at home to Watford. And also, game week 30, is this really the one to be using your free hit in? I mean, Nimi said that you're going to be looking at.
I'm trying to stumble through it, actually. I'm looking to stumble through. I don't want to use the free hit that week. I'd only use it now if it happened.
That's it. So Ben Crellin, his predictions to the spreadsheet basically is saying that there are going to be probably 4 games at best regarding, unless something ridiculous happens. So Aston Villa, Arsenal, Wolves, Leeds, Leicester, Brentford, and Burnley, Southampton probably going to be the 4 games that happen there. Is that going to be worth free hitting in? Absolutely not. Like, they're not the best games. And if you're transferring in Arsenal players this week, for example, then you're already building your way there if you're free hitting the next game week.
That's what I'm thinking. I'd rather kind of build towards game week 30 now with Arsenal players, Wolves players, and buy a Broha, buy some Burnley players, and just pray that Burnley Southampton isn't a blank that week. Because I think for that to be a blank, it's got to be a kind of a semi-cup upset.
But you've got free transfers.
You do, but then equally, imagine you do it like me and you get Broha or you get the Burnley players. And then those free assets you have don't have a game because Southampton beat West Ham in the cup. And we won't know that till after the game week 27 deadline. So for me, it's kind of like with Burnley having the double-double, why not just take that punt? Why not buy the Tarkowski for Dawson maybe, take that hit, play him for 2 doubles and just pray that West Ham knock out Southampton from the cup and Southampton play Burnley in a 30. So I think that's the mentality I've got, is my free hit very much is dependent on that game. And I think it's the same for Ben Crellin as well, where he may try to get through that week without a free hit. Now, if I had 2, I would like you use 27 100%, because I think that triple United, triple City that week, they're going to be great. And then you've got, actually, I think Spurs play Leeds as well. So there's some good fixtures to actually target in that. And you could then attack this game week much more heavily as well with triple Arsenal, free hit in 27. I think either way, whether you've got 1 or 2, try to stumble through 30 is my advice. However, obviously, this is very early. This is way before game week 30. So be flexible is, I suppose, what I'm saying. Like, so something like a Wolves player or Arsenal player, that's more flexible than a Burnley or Southampton player, because one of them is actually guaranteed a game. The others is 50%.
Yeah, I mean, you've got maybe, if you're answering to Benny Blanco's question, probably the 33 is another one where that's probably the best place to play the other free hit.
That's the semi-final, right? So
I just think 30 is going to be so rubbish. There's no point using a free hit there. You're going to be buying in the players that most people will already be covering, and you're going to be basically playing the whole game of, will appearance points basically give me a green arrow? Probably not, actually, because most people can have 6, 7, easily get to 8 or 9 players. I think that'll be enough, really. And I think
don't know about 8 or 9 in 30. That's very ambitious, but I would be very happy with 6 or 7 if it's the current fixtures.
But I mean, most of your key players can be owned, and I think it's probably going to be the case of kind of hoping some esoteric players can do the job for you. Anthony, final question this week.
I thought you were going to read it yourself. I was like, well, okay, I'm waiting. Yeah, this question was basically asking about free hits, and it was basically asking about which core players would be targeted for the free hit in 27, and is Triple Burnley viable? Is Triple Burnley viable? Probably not, I think, is kind of the first question that we might kind of deal with in that particular quandary. From there on, the free hit in 27, I think you're like helpfully, because Man City are playing, they are going to be part of the core. And as Nima touched upon there as well, I think whether you like it or not, you're going to probably put United players into this because they're playing against Watford, and they're one of the few big teams that are left there. There, Leeds.
I think, are they playing Leeds? Leeds?
No, they're playing Watford.
Are they? So when?
Yeah, Leeds play Spurs.
Okay, I think
United play Leeds during the double game week in 26.
Oh no, I think of Spurs, City, and United as the 3 teams you want to cover. Hence why you can't have free Burnley.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
yeah, get where you're coming from. Yes. Anyway, kind of beyond that, then I do feel like the free hit in 27 is going to give you kind of a certain amount of leeway to go for real differentials there. Like, okay, you will put Son in, for example, because as we now touched upon, Spurs are playing against Leeds. Like, would you go for more Spurs attackers? I'm not sure. Like, I think you could get quite a bit more from, for example, getting maybe 1 or 2 Palace fellas into your team, your Eliza's, your Gallagher's, whoever they're at.
I like Broha as well against Norwich. I think that's a nice...
Broha for Norwich, and indeed like someone like one of their defenders.
JWP has to be worth.
Yeah, this is one of these classic double game week things.
He's the free hit pickup moments.
It's that people will get Cornet instead of JWP in his single game week against Norwich.
Yeah, and like then you're kind of thinking about like like someone like Bednarek, for example, who gets up kind of a decent amount of corners or whatever. I know now he kind of played half of the last game, so what's his situation? Need to do a bit of reading into that and figure out where he is for 27. But someone like Bednarek could be a handy pickup for that particular fixture, for example. But would you put him down as a cert? Obviously, Bowen is going to be in this as well.
I think he has to be in.
He's not. You're not going to move him on. But is this the sort of one where you'd want to get, let's say, an Antonio on top of it? I'm not sure if you would. I'm not sure.
Not against Wolves. I don't think I'd want that West Ham double up there.
Yeah, and then actually, do you know what? Newcastle playing at Brentford. Just kind of seeing the way things are going with this whole entire scheme that's occurring at Newcastle, and whether there's anyone who's kind of screaming out. It's unfortunate that Trippier is now going to be injured. He would have been the sort of player that would have been handy to put in with obviously set pieces, 2 free kick goals and whatever in the last few weeks. He won't be playing. It seems he may not play again this season with his injury. He would have been interesting, but like Bruno, as I see he's being called, could well be a player that'll feature on our radars, or indeed just good old Chris Wood or something. So anyway, there's a lot of interesting ones for there. Nima, is there anyone I've missed there that's kind of screaming out to you, or indeed Tom?
I think just Saint Maximan does excite me quite a lot. But Triple City, just on that topic, because we obviously we kind of brush it off as it's so obvious, but it's so hard because unless you go for Cancelo and Laporte, which you would assume are nailed now after the lead in this first leg, but apart from that, it's kind of like, who do you get? Like, are they the first game that game week? I don't know. Like, is there any chance that we can guess who's going to start? Do you get a De Bruyne, Mahrez, Sterling, Foden, Bernardo, Gundogan? There's so many options, right? So do you go double mid on a free hit instead of double defense, maybe to attack it differently to the people
So I
who
think that's the risk versus reward thing. I think if you're someone like you, Nima, who's flying, you probably go for the double defense. If myself and Tom were in that position, we'd probably be going for the double attackers and seeing what happens and sticking someone like Sterling in.
nice.
But anyway, I think that's game of 27 is it's tomorrow's war. We're not quite there yet, so
Yeah.
I think we'll bring ourselves on to the present war instead, and the transfers and captains for the coming weekend.
Yep, and I think Nima, let's see where you are at the moment. So you've got your triple captain already activated on Salah. It's there. You're ready. Any transfers this week in terms of what you're going to be doing?
Yeah, so I'm pretty set on Ronaldo out. That's like kind of happening. That's my free transfer no matter what. It's likely to be. It was going to be Weghorst or Kane. I'm waiting for some news on Weghorst. I'm hoping Dyche doesn't just say he's touch and go. I'm hoping the presser gives a bit more info than that. But there is Kane there. There is Weghorst. There is Jimenez and Broja, but someone is coming in. I'm either going to get Ramsdale as the second goalkeeper for Gunnarsson that you see over there and play him over De Gea and then play De Gea in 27, or I'm going to do De Gea straight to Pope. So a -4 is guaranteed. That's kind of coming no matter what. And then the question is, do I take that -8? So I think we got asked tonight about Foden to Son. I've talked about Dawson to Tarkowski. If I take a -8, it will likely be one of those two. But right now, Foden, the early sub in the Champions League, I really want him for that Everton fixture as well when I'm not free hitting in 27, as you say. I can't see myself selling Foden for Son now. I could do Jota to Son in 27 as my transfer then when I've got 5 Arsenal and Liverpool players and I'm not free hitting. So I think for me, just in terms of bus team and what I'm going to do, let's say I'm going to get Kane. I'm going to get maybe Ramsdale or Pope. And then I'm probably going to stop there. If I get very excited and try to take a -8 for this week, Tarkowski is a shoe-in, I reckon. I think Foden to Son is not going to happen. I've talked myself out of that over the course of tonight.
And then we're moving on to my team here. And right, where are we? the team that's laid out here, the starting 11 is Foster, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Cancelo, Laporte, and Veltman. Then the midfield of Bowen, Jota, Fernandes, Salah with the captaincy on him right now in the picture. And then I have Weghorst and Emmanuel Dennis up front. I have a bench then of João Pedro, the suspended is Ezri Konsa, and of course the ubiquitous Alan, as well as David De Gea. Now, I'm genuinely considering rolling a transfer because I have a bit of an issue with the blanks in 27 in that I have just I've just too many players blanking. And so with that in mind, because I've got at least I've João Pedro coming off the bench for his probably like 2 substitute appearances for 1 point each. I do wonder if there's any kind of clear transfer I should make here. Like I think the big risk that I want to take is probably putting that triple captaincy on Trent Alexander-Arnold, as we've discussed. I'm going to say 87% sure that I'll go ahead with that particular triple captaincy on Trent, short of any news changing. It's really my big transfer changes will depend on the Weghorst news. If it turns out that good old Wout is going to be out, then I might need to move him out, or indeed move someone else like João Pedro out, because otherwise I would feel a bit shortchanged and wouldn't have much of a forward line there. That would be a bit of a disaster. I've really not thought through who I would bring in from there, although if Arsenal had a decent striker that I'd like to bring in, I'd be probably bringing them in. But because they don't, then I'd be thinking about whether I might have to do it and sell Alan to bring in someone like Saka or something. He's stayed there as a mascot. He survived all sorts of trials and tribulations. He even survived Logic when Logic said that I should just get Ramsey when I was doing the wild card, and I just refused to, and I stuck with him. But now I think we're at the point where the forwards are just such a joke that I can't continue to have a meme mascot in midfield. It's just the wrong place. So maybe I'll adopt Adam Ida or something instead as my new mascot, since Tom was just such a Judas and sold him.
He's out for free. He's He could be out for 3 months apparently due to his injury recently. Unfortunately, Adam Ida.
Oh my
Oh,
Christ!
really? Oh,
It's
wow.
it's Jesus. It's too early in the week for that sort of bad news.
What's going on with
Um,
João Pedro on your bench?
what's going on with João Pedro? He's lost. Actually, he found his way into my team a few weeks ago. It was disappointing for me. It was even worse for João Pedro. He actually lost a manager as well along the way. Things aren't good for any of us, specifically for João, but not good for me either. Does that answer that question?
I, I think I don't know. Like I would
Oh,
play him
God.
over Veltman, but I could see what you mean about the narrative of not always playing the attacker over the defender, Tom, because in reality, Veltman probably outscores him.
Of course, Veltman outscores him.
But it's the upside, right? You got to check that João Pedro hat
João
trick.
Pedro assists, it could happen.
Veltman almost accidentally himself his way to an assist again today. The day is going to come where he'll get his return, and I will feel somewhat smug as I still get a red arrow.
The thing that I see though is that João's got four vowels that could be changed into different things. So you could have
Why are we going
J.
to Wordle talk?
J, football, A, assist, O, goal, Pedro, goal. So you could have a hat trick and an assist of in his name that you could then tweet to say, yeah, you know what, I've massively smashed it.
I'd have to tweet first. Maybe I get Evan Ferguson instead. That'll be my new Irish mascot.
I can't wait till next game week, Anthony, when
he's at Brighton.
On your last episode, when João Pedro is sitting on your bench with 21 points.
Nima, I will donate £210 to a charity of your choice if João Pedro has 21 points.
Okay, exactly 21, or can we say 20 plus?
20 plus. I'll give you 20 plus.
Just give me that 20.
Yeah, no problem. 20 plus, that's fine. Honestly. Tom, go on, your team.
Right. Yeah. So my team is interesting, to say the least. Yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of doublers, to be honest. I've got Foster, I've got Kilman, Trent, and Robertson at the back. So 4 doublers in defence. I've got Jota. I'm going to have Salah as well there. So maybe Jota, maybe Robertson makes way for Salah. Likes of Buendia, the likes of Bowen, Singlers. I did have Martinelli, who unfortunately did get sent off. So that has put a spanner in the works. Up front, I've got Kane, Edouard, and King, who've all got double game weeks as well. Do I trust Edouard or King to do anything? No, not really. I don't think they can do very much. I'm genuinely a bit torn on what to do. So I've got to get Salah back. I want to get Arsenal defence covered. Getting Salah back means selling one of Jota and Robbo. The Arsenal buy is ideal, really, because if I'm going to strap into a free hit in 27, that means that I've got an Arsenal player for game week 30 and also basically for the rest of our season, which is very, very good. But it means that for 27, I need to free hit. I've only got 1 free hit left. I'm probably going to have to use that in 27. And then do I bench boost? Do I triple captain? Do I bench boost the likes of the Aston Villa players at home to Watford? I'm not entirely sure. Do I bench boost the likes of, Cancelo at home to Spurs? I'm not entirely sure either. All I do expect basically is an absolute car crash and regret that I didn't do the alternative of what I actually do. I think I'm at that point now in my life. But I think the one thing that is on the table for me is Trent triple captain, and just going that way. And I could basically avoid taking a hit this week. Just move out Jota and Fernandes for Salah +1. I do think
that screams pain.
I do think it probably is worth buying in Ramsdale as in goal and just kind of having him there for the rest of the season, to be honest. So I think I'm not too averse to doing goalkeeper transfer. I do think that having Nima was saying earlier about taking a big hit and just going for it this week, I think that could also be on the table. I'm not entirely sure basically right now. I think a lot of it will depend on the mins tomorrow for Liverpool players. And I really think that it basically, at my OR, it might be worth just kind of looking beyond the Salah captaincy. But also, if he does anything in either of the 2 games, then that's basically season over, really. Like if Salah scores a hat-trick against Norwich or scores a hat-trick against Burnley, Leeds, or there's something in both games, then basically it's all over. So it's a very difficult decision.
Does that not scare you both then?
Uh,
I guess there's maximum gain to be had.
Yeah, but I mean, if you were saying about EO earlier, the problem is that your EO is very much linked to your rank. So if you're doing well, then you need to care about EO a lot because at the end of the day, you want to maintain your rank. You want to make sure your downside is protected. For us, it's probably not in the same realm. For us, it's probably more about the gains you could possibly make. But if it goes wrong, looking at those gains, then you can basically just torpedo your season. So,
but it's crazy because obviously Anthony's talking about rolling a transfer. You're talking about not taking a hit. And then I'm kind of talking about -4 or -8. And
but you can lose those points. You can
I
afford
see
to
what
lose those
you
points.
See, Nima, if I don't roll, I probably -8. Like this is the thing. Like it's not going to be the middle ground. Like if you kind of heard me there, it was like, okay, if Weghorst was past fit, then I can roll. If he isn't past fit, then suddenly we're into the just burn the whole temple down type scenario. And we don't know where we're going from there. But yeah,
what do you think about Lacazette? And so
no.
You don't want to burn any of your listeners by owning Lacazette. Let's not talk about him. But but he is the captain of the club now, and like he will play. I'm pretty sure
for like 4 months. Yeah.
Like I was thinking I could get Lacazette and Tierney, but that is like I'd be nuts to do that because then I'd have 5 players blanking in 27, and I don't want a free hit.
But
so that doesn't add up.
But you could take like a 20-point hit and go again. Get.
So there are people like that, right?
Get Loughton. But yeah.
But then there are managers like that, right? Who take a hit to attack each week as it comes.
They're probably not at your rank though, Nima.
that is true. I feel very fortunate to be here, and I think you're right. The higher up you may be, you start to get very worried, and you just kind of plug holes.
Yes, absolutely.
You're not trying to attack anymore.
Absolutely, and I guess with that, Nima, as you say, thank you for coming on. We thank you. It's great to have you here, and we were who got the assist. If you want to send in correspondence for what is going to be the last of my podcast, then whogotttheassist@gmail.com is the email that you need to use, or you can just reach out to us on WhatsApps or Twitter DMs or whatever else you might have. Nima, thanks again. It was great to have you. Really good banter all the way through.
Thanks, guys. It's been a pleasure, guys.
Great insights as well too, and best of luck with the meetup there in a few weeks' time. I commend people to attend it.
Thank you.
Yeah, we hope to assist you throughout all of this. Please send in a correspondence and please write in if you have anything to say to Anthony ahead of the last podcast in the last couple of weeks. Even if it is just bug off. We don't want you here anymore. We're very glad you're being replaced. But please write.
I prefer upgraded. It's a more accurate term.
Backfilled, as we say in the corporate world. But please write in to whogottthis@gmail.com any messages you have for Anthony before he goes off into his actual life beyond fantasy football. We hope to assist you in this podcast. I'll speak to you next week ahead of the game week. 26 at some point. I think it might be a solo pod next Thursday because of Swift turnaround. I think it's literally like Thursday night, the game week finishes, Friday, the blank starts. And Anthony's final pod will be on the 1st of March. Nick will be joining us for that, and we'll be able to kind of give him a good send off for that. In the meantime, hope to see you and speak to you very soon. Goodbye.
Ow.